Initially, he thought that both of them would tacitly agree to first search for the Palunga clan's holy land. Now, however, Gula felt his advantage was too significant. He didn't even consider the human clan a threat. Under his command, powerful individuals continuously slaughtered the Palunga clan's members, eliminating the human clan along with them. Cooperating with the Palunga clan would have been such a perfect arrangement. But alas, why didn't you call me? Wuli complained as he woke up in the hot spring, causing the divine power to ripple and evaporate the water droplets on his body. He quickly put on some clothes and sat opposite Jian Wushuang, grabbing the drink on the table and taking a large gulp. Tell me, what's on your mind? Wuli cleared his throat and began to inquire about the plan discussed during the day. He was actually more anxious than Jian Wushuang. The pressure was increasing by the moment. The Treant within him felt the same. Initially, they thought this sacred assembly would proceed like the previous ones. But things started to change from the Roman River. Encountering a sixth tribulation realm powerhouse was unexpected. And it didn't stop there. Upon arriving at the Dragon God continent, they encountered the first powerhouse of the infinite great world. If they could quietly pass through the Dragon God continent, it would have been acceptable. However, the ancient Wood continent issued a collective mission, and its core conflicted directly with Gula. Wu Li's strength and trump cards were no longer sufficient. Even now, at the sixth tribulation realm, they couldn't shake the situation. They had to rely on Jian Wushuang. My plan is simple. Cultivate diligently and reach the eighth tribulation realm as soon as possible, Jian Wushuang said as he gulped down strong liquor, sounding almost nonsensical. The crucial part was that Wu Li actually believed him. He stared at Jian Wushuang earnestly and asked, "Are you planning to break through to the tribulation realm?" Jian Wushuang was taken aback by the sincerity in Wu Li's eyes, feeling a headache coming on. If you break through now, there might be hope. But attempting to cross 8 tribulations at once seems too risky. Why not aim for the 7th tribulation realm first? It's safer. Wu Li spoke as if it were all real. He was almost convinced himself. Jian Wushuang quickly interrupted him and explained, "Breaking through to the tribulation realm is not that easy. If it were, I would have done it already." However, he was certain of one thing. When he reached the tribulation realm, crossing 5 tribulations at once wouldn't be a problem. By then, he would have to find the others and return to the Qixin temple together. Reaching the 6th tribulation realm would be quite stable. The condition was that after Fan Tianfeng returned, he could ascertain Mieshang's strength. He had digressed a bit. Jian Wushuang shook his head to clear his mind and recounted everything about the Empress and Li Shang to himself. He asked Wu Li for ideas on how to deal with the situation. "How about we run away?" Wu Li, now realizing the gravity of the situation, took the initiative to propose a method to enter Wanlu. Jian Wushuang was pleasantly surprised by this unexpected suggestion. Finally, he got some insight into entering Wanlu. According to Wu Li, entering Wanlu required the life force, which was just one step. More importantly, it required 2 cultivators to inject their origin source into Wanlu together, and both must possess life force. "How do you know there's life force in my origin source?" Jian Wushuang immediately grasped the key point and stood up. This matter was too significant. His life force was an absolute secret in ancient moon spacetime. Even if the spacetime treasure was exposed, the matter of life force couldn't be disclosed. Seeing his strong reaction, Wu Li quickly pulled him back to sit down and explained, "Don't blame me for keeping it from you. Today I'll let you know something too. The elder Treant within me is my teacher. You know that? But do you know his identity?" "I don't know." Jian Wushuang shook his head, his ears perking up, waiting for Wu Li's explanation. Gulp. At this moment, Wu Li calmed down. He took a sip of strong liquor to moisten his throat, then lowered his voice and said, "Remember when I mentioned the Lord of Hangmu?" "Of course." Jian Wushuang nodded. It was because of one of Wu Li's stories that he chose to cooperate with him. His first entry point into ancient moon spacetime was Wanlu. Then, a series of events unfolded around Wanlu. Entering Qingyun Gate to establish his identity, initially currying favor with Elder Mukin, then marrying in, and later going to the Sure Kingdom to refine the sword blank. His strength was constantly skyrocketing. Finally, he participated in the sacred assembly and came to the infinite great world. Everything was laid out for Wan Lu. It was all because of a rumor that he dared to take such risks. Wu Li was also deeply moved, so he chose to tell him some things. The Treant is the Lord of Hengmu? Jian Wushuang guessed what was happening and asked directly. Wu Li nodded heavily and continued. Moreover, my teacher almost reached the 8th tribulation realm back then. This was even more incredible than the rumors had suggested. Moreover, the fact that the Lord of Hengmu was still alive was outrageous. The rumors had claimed otherwise. Through Wu Li's explanations, he gradually understood. Initially, the Lord of Hengmu, amidst the Wanlu willows, obtained a treasure that could defy fate. He had been cautious, never daring to reveal it, always suppressing his cultivation. He feared being discovered. But in the end, someone did find out. The former divine Wood King personally descended and severely injured the Lord of Hengmu, who was at the half-step 8th tribulation realm. Later, the Lord of Hengmu faked his death and encountered Wu Li, who was still an ordinary mortal at the time, and took refuge within Wu Li's body. And thus, the Wu family of Yu Kingdom came to be. Compared to their two schemes, the Lord of Hengmu had already begun his layout countless eons ago. And they were merely pawns. How extraordinary is this treasure? Jian Wushuang's voice was also hushed. In his heart, he pondered, could it be a space-time treasure? It was quite possible. Take, for example, his SkySight heavenly chessboard. The help it provided was almost boundless. Even at the level of Emperor, he didn't need to cultivate. He could casually comprehend the origin source within those chess pieces, strengthen himself, and even devour those origins to enhance his own. Honest introspection begged the question. If he were a bit more ordinary, just like an ordinary genius, could he reach the half-step 8th tribulation realm with the SkySight heavenly chessboard alone? This possibility still depended on luck to some extent. The first true king, who once possessed the SkySight heavenly chessboard, only reached the half-step 6th tribulation realm. He was simply unlucky. If it hadn't been for Qixin and Mieshang preventing the destruction of the Moro spacetime, perhaps, the first true king could have ascended further. But even so, there was still some gap compared to the Lord of Hengmu. Half-step 8 tribulation realm. Even when severely injured by Divine Wood King, that treasure was also seized by Divine Wood King. If it weren't for Divine Wood King's interference, perhaps the Lord of Hengmu could truly have become the universe master at the 8th tribulation realm. Wu Li lowered his voice once again, cautiously saying, I don't know much about the specific function of this treasure, but my teacher once told me that it can bestow origin source upon scattered tribulations, prolong their lives, and amplify their divine power. What? Jian Wushuang exclaimed. If this were true, it would be terrifying. The Divine Wood King possessed such a treasure, yet always appeared weak to the outside world. There must be some conspiracy, or perhaps the Divine Wood King himself couldn't safeguard the treasure. Once exposed, he feared that the universe masters at the 8th tribulation level would come to seize it. Lower your voice, Jian Wushuang. Consider the bigger picture. Wu Li hastily pulled him down, then continued. This treasure only has an effect on scattered tribulations. My teacher controlled it for so long but couldn't fully understand it. However, my teacher mentioned that if he had continued to possess that treasure, he might have broken through the 9th tribulation. Jian Wushuang was completely stunned this time. The 9th tribulation. The more they talked, the more unbelievable it sounded. The ancient moon spacetime, the only 9th tribulation level, belonged to that celestial maiden. And she had fallen. For such a long time, no one had been able to break through to the 9th tribulation level. It wasn't that he looked down on the Lord of Hengmu. He just had some doubts about Wu Li's exaggeration to deceive him into getting involved. The 9th tribulation level was a huge temptation for everyone. Jian Wushuang was no exception. The path to the ancient moon spacetime was cut off. But his path was not. The ancient moon spacetime was just a springboard for him to break through the 9 major spacetimes. With enough strength, he could just leave without a care. He couldn't stay in the ancient moon spacetime forever. He had also noticed its continuous weakening. Perhaps at some point the Celestial Maiden would play a trick and destroy the entire ancient moon spacetime. It would be better to leave early. The premise was that he became a universe master and then gathered the people he brought along. He couldn't just leave on his own and ignore the others. The 9th tribulation level, forget it. He shook his head with a bitter smile. He had confidence in himself and it was justified. He wasn't about to believe just because of something Wu Li said. However, Wu Li's expression turned serious as he spoke. Jian Wushuang, do you not trust me? I don't. He shook his head. He had heard plenty about the ancient moon spacetime from Weiss. That guy was a god. He didn't easily trust the words of gods. Why would he trust Wu Li? Wu Li felt a bit embarrassed. He cleared his throat and continued. If you don't believe that, then how about this? With that, he took out a treasure from his mustard seed. Though it was called a treasure, it was just a leaf. What's this? Jian Wushuang frowned, taking the leaf and examining it carefully. Then, he exclaimed in shock. Could this be a Wanlu leaf from the Wanlu tree? Wu Li chuckled lightly and nodded. Indeed, it was a leaf from the Wanlu tree, plucked when the Lord of Hengmu left the tree. He had acquired quite a few back then. He had used some when he made his breakthrough, and now only this one remained which he had to use to persuade Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang stared at the willow leaf, and as he observed the patterns on it, his eyes flickered. He was immediately immersed in enlightenment. This willow leaf carried the true essence of time. It was the core of his breakthrough. Mastering time. As he looked at the leaf, his mind became as clear as a blank slate. Recalling his understanding of time back then, it seemed utterly inadequate. While spatial realms were mainly divided into stars, starseas, black holes, and the universe, the division of time was extremely profound. Each had its own insights. Everyone was different. In this moment, he instantly grasped his own true understanding of time. I've made progress, Jian Wushuang murmured. In this moment of trance, he had actually stepped into the origin source of time. He was one step closer to breaking through the tribulation realm. He didn't know the exact role of this Wanlu willow leaf, but it had allowed him to grasp the origin source of time. It was definitely the most supreme treasure. How about it? Do you believe now? Wu Li said with a smile. However, Jian Wushuang shook his head. This was just a beginning. The other party didn't even understand why the ancient moon spacetime hadn't produced the 9th tribulation realm. This willow leaf wasn't something that could solve everything. Wu Li became anxious and continued. Jian Wushuang, I've said all I can. We came here for the Wanjia tree. We can't give up halfway. I'm not backing out. Jian Wushuang also felt somewhat helpless. If the other party was so anxious now, it might lead to a mistake. He didn't know that it wasn't Wu Li who was in a hurry, but the Trey Ant. That is, the Lord of Hengmu. Well then, what are we waiting for? Let's get ready to leave. Wu Li gestured with 2 fingers as if running. Jian Wushuang hesitated for a moment. Now wasn't the time to be at odds with the Empress. Moreover, Wu Li's suggestion wasn't entirely unreasonable. Since the other party was confident, he had been following Wu Li's plan anyway, so why not go along with it now? In the end, he gritted his teeth, finished the last sip of wine, and said firmly, "Let's go." Both of them stood up simultaneously, preparing to inform Danbao that they were leaving. But before they could even go inside to inform Danbao had already come out. "Are you two leaving?" Danbao widened his eyes, staring at them. Jian Wushuang nodded and said, "We've rested enough. We don't want to trouble the nobles any longer." "All right. I'll report to the Grand Elder." With that, Danbao turned to leave. At this moment, Wu Li reminded him through voice transmission, "They might try to stop us. Shouldn't we slip away quietly?" This suggestion was directly vetoed by Jian Wushuang. This was the sacred land of the Palunga clan. Escaping would be a problem no matter what. It was better to be honest. Telling the truth was the best option. Boom! In the sky, a cloud dispersed, and the people below looked up. Jian Wushuang and Wu Li were also surprised. Danbao, who had been about to report to the Grand Elder, also froze in place. Then, They heard the ancient bell of the dragon god mountain ringing, and the colors of the sky and earth changed. The dazzling night sky full of stars instantly turned into daylight. This is enemy attack. At that moment, not only Jian Wushuang and his companions reacted, but also the strengthened members of the Palunga clan on Dragon God Mountain, who ascended into the air and reached the mountain's summit. They never imagined that the humans and Gula's subordinates would locate this place so quickly. And just as Jian Wushuang and his group were about to implement their plan, it was once again declared a failure. This stroke of bad luck seemed to have hit them all in a single day. Let's go to the summit to assess the situation first. Jian Wushuang's expression darkened, forced to change the plan on the fly. He enveloped the elixirs with divine power, his wings fluttering behind him as he soared to the mountaintop. Wu Li followed closely behind. Upon reaching the summit, they discovered that several hundred members of the Palunga clan had already gathered there. Their expressions were grim, especially when they saw Jian Wushuang and Wu Li, distrust flickering in their eyes. The attackers of the Holy Land were the humans and Gula's subordinates. For these combat-oriented members of the Palunga clan to find the Holy Land so quickly, they immediately began to doubt Jian Wushuang and Wu Li. It was only natural. Jian Wushuang and Wu Li could only shrink into a corner, afraid to say a word. This time, not only were they unlucky, but the Palunga clan was also in a tough spot. The strong warriors from the remaining tribes had just gathered, carrying the dragon balls, seeking refuge in the Holy Land to escape disaster, only to be discovered by the humans and Gula's henchmen. Now they were trapped directly in the Holy Land. They couldn't leave even if they wanted to. Jian Wushuang and Wu Li didn't dare to leave either. The crucial point was that they could leave whenever they wanted. Never mind whether the outsiders would spare them. Even the strong warriors of the Palunga clan wouldn't let them go easily. They had to stay put. The strong warriors at the mountaintop kept gathering. Jian Wushuang scanned with his telepathy and found that there were 5 of them just at the 6th tribulation realm. Maybe they could really hold up. As long as Gula didn't personally intervene, there shouldn't be any problem with the first wave of attacks. Wushuang, how about we retreat a bit further? Wu Li's gaze wandered at this moment, and his figure kept moving backward. Jian Wushuang looked up and noticed Elder Blue walking towards them. He gently patted Wu Li's shoulder, motioning for him to stay calm and not move, then took the initiative to walk over and said, "Elder Blue, feel free to command us if you need any help. Great Elder, please come in for a discussion," Elder Blue said calmly. Dan Bao also walked out of the Grand Elder's house at this time and nodded at him. He turned to Wu Li with a gesture, then replied, "Good. We also have something to discuss with the Great Elder." Pulling Wu Li along, they entered the Great Elder's house. Upon entering, they found 5 other senior Palunga warriors present, all at the peak of the 5th tribulation realm. It seemed they came from external tribes. Apart from them, there was one familiar face. Zack didn't expect him to be alive. From this perspective, the strength of the Palunga clan was much stronger than that of the humans. On the human side, there were quite a few strong warriors comparable to the 6th tribulation realm. But only Empress had truly reached the 6th tribulation realm, and there were only about 100 people. The Palunga clan had 5 6th tribulation realm warriors, and dozens of 5th tribulation realm warriors. With just the human side alone, they couldn't break in. Let's see how powerful Gula's subordinates are, as Li Shang said. There might actually be hope. Upon seeing Jian Wushuang and Wu Li enter, the Grand Elder, worn out both physically and mentally, spoke, "Two benefactors. There's something I hope you can tell me about the Palunga clan." "Elder, please speak." Jian Wushuang cut to the chase without beating around the bush. This time, instead of speaking, the Grand Elder looked to one of the tribe elders who was also quite old. That elder happened to be Elder Jones, the one Zack went to rescue. He paused before speaking up. "Please, 2 benefactors, share the information about the external experts with us. This would greatly assist us. If this time we can withstand the experts of the human race and Gula's subordinates, the Grand Elder will personally see you off Dragon God Continent." "This?" Wu Li hesitated for a moment, his expression serious. "This seems a bit off. We saved people from your Palunga clan, and we can promise not to harm your Palunga people, but betraying the human race, that's a different matter. Jian Wushuang also hesitated. Betrayal was one thing. What he feared was closing off his own path. Those people outside from the human race weren't all good people. Even if he betrayed them, even if he helped the Palunga clan protect their homeland, he wouldn't feel much psychological burden. The only worry was if he ended up on the same boat as the Palunga clan, and then the Palunga clan was finished. What would they do then? This was a very real concern. The Palunga clan simply couldn't withstand Gula. He thought that the battle between the external experts of the human race and Gula's subordinates would delay things. But now that all the Dragon Balls from outside had arrived at the Palunga Holy Land, there wasn't much left to fight for. The silent cooperation between the two sides had already made things clear. First, wipe out the Palunga clan, and then determine the outcome. These fools! Jian Wushuang cursed inwardly. The experts of the human race probably hadn't realized the strength of Gula's experts yet. They knew even less about the Frost Demon clan. They probably thought that, with the Empress's million divine powers, they could contend with Gula. It was simply laughable. Wooly couldn't make up his mind and looked at Jian Wushuang again. To be honest, my knowledge of the experts from the outside world is also limited. I only have some superficial understanding of the strength of some powerful individuals in certain kingdoms. The Grand Elder should be aware of this. I originally came from the 16 kingdoms of the Qingqiao. Jian Wushuang decided to be straightforward. He didn't know much. Just selling out the experts from the 16 kingdoms would probably be enough. The Qingqiao 16 kingdoms were established by a universe master of the 8th Tribulation Realm. Later, it was divided into 16 kingdoms. The Yonghing kingdom had ceased to exist. The forces of the Esjai kingdom had been completely annihilated. Only 14 kingdoms remained. Their strengths varied greatly. After discarding Yu Kingdom and the daughter kingdom indebted to it, only 12 kingdoms were left. Among these 12 kingdoms, the several strongest universe masters at the 5th Tribulation Realm were all accounted for. Of course, such data on their combat prowess was merely surface level. Who knew how formidable their hidden cards might be? Is this all? Elder Jones shook his head, sighing. Well, it's better than nothing. Having something was better than nothing. However, Elder Blue, who followed along, didn't share this sentiment. As a universe master at the 5th Tribulation Realm, he didn't even bat an eye. Jian Wushuang then shifted the conversation, mentioning Gula's subordinates. Elders, the threat of the 16 kingdoms may not be that formidable, but Gula's subordinates include several 6th Tribulation Realm powerhouses, likely among the top in the infinite great world. Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow, revealing the situation with Kinyu. This 6th Tribulation Realm special life form had brought many strong individuals from the far north icefield to the Dragon God continent. This information had been relayed to him by Li Shang. Now, he passed it on to the Palunga clan. He felt somewhat sorry for Li Shang. Originally, there had been a plan for him, but now he had nothing. Li Shang also awkwardly became one of Gula's subordinates, utterly useless without Jian Wushuang's support. The outcome was even more bleak. What Jian Wushuang didn't know was that Li Shang was on the verge of reaching the 5th Tribulation Realm peak. His future looked bright. Even Gula admired him greatly. Moreover, Kinyu had promised to take Li Shang to the far north icefield to become a demon saint. Li Shang was now torn about whether to join him. The darkness wasn't within Li Shang but within Jian Wushuang and Wu Li. These two were currently caught in the middle and feeling extremely uncomfortable. Kinyu, Elder Jones recalled something, his eyes trembling slightly. He then reported to the Grand Elder. When Zack and I escaped, we once felt a terrifying aura comparable to Gula's. It should be him, with a divine power of at least 900,000. Upon hearing this, Blue clenched his fists but remained silent. 900,000 divine power. A peak 6th Tribulation Realm powerhouse. Comparable to TMU King. With this level of strength, one could dominate any corner of the infinite great world. Brew, you prepare your people for battle. Our two benefactors can leave whenever they wish, no hindrance. If help is needed, do not hesitate to ask. The elder chief said, then closed his eyes. Everyone bowed respectfully and exited the room. Jian Wushuang and Wu Li followed behind. They also walked out of the house together. Just as they all turned away, the elder chief opened a slit of his eyes, staring at the backs of Jian Wushuang and Wu Li, murmuring to himself, "Is my lifespan truly bound to the fate of the Palunga clan?" The elder chief recalled a lesson left to him by the dragon god in the past. The fate of the Palunga clan didn't lie in the strength of future generations. It entirely rested upon him alone. He couldn't hold on much longer, originally estimating another 10,000 years of life. But this crisis had caused a drastic reduction. Less than 100 years remained. But now, the crisis facing the Palunga clan couldn't even last a year. Time was running out. Yet, there was still a glimmer of hope, but he dared not gamble. If the lesson was true, and he perished, the Palunga clan would be finished. He had no choice but to gamble again. Now, he could only assess the situation. Outside the Dragon God Mountain, the barrier had begun to loosen. Blue, who maintained the great array of the Dragon God Mountain, wore a grim expression. Now he had to make a choice. To shrink the range of the barrier. To shrink it to the peak of the Dragon God Mountain. Then descend the mountain for battle. Otherwise, even if it shrank further, it would be breached. By then, he would still need to protect others, which wouldn't be conducive to combat. He could only take the initiative. Everyone, gather at the peak. I will control the barrier within the range of the peak, and then others will join me in facing the enemy. Blue calmly instructed the other strong warriors to prepare for battle. Then he himself controlled the formation and began to shrink the barrier. Outside the mountain, human strongmen, led by Empress Fengqian, stood on the left. Gula led his subordinates on the right. TSK, looks like we're going to take the initiative. How interesting. Gula stroked his chin, waiting for the spectacle to unfold. Behind Gula stood Kinyu, with a burly figure and 2 spiral horns on his head. Though he himself was not of the Frost Demon clan. With arms crossed, he stood imposingly, disdain evident in his voice. Your Majesty, why not let me go and slaughter those human strongmen first? Watching them is becoming tiresome. Li Shang, standing further back, felt a chill run down his spine upon hearing this statement, simultaneously filled with worry. He worried that the humans were finished. So he truly couldn't go back. No, there's no need for that. Let's conquer this place first, then we'll see. We need to take it step by step, Gula said, raising his hand and pointing, causing an extreme point to begin spreading out. In an instant, it turned into a scorching sun. The strong men of the human side continued to attack the barrier incessantly. Upon seeing Gula's move, they began to retreat one after another. Even the Empress frowned. Though she had reached the 6th Tribulation Realm and even completed the core task in one of the ruins, reaching the peak of the 6th Tribulation Realm, her divine power could barely reach 1,000,000 under normal circumstances. But currently, she only had 900,000. It was nothing like Gula, who could easily gather 1,000,000 divine power with a wave of his hand. This made her extremely wary of Gula. Besides Gula, there was also that Kinyu equally powerful. In contrast, her side was too singular. All of them were at the 5th Tribulation Realm, lacking top-tier combat power. The black sun of divine power condensed by Gula grew stronger and stronger, reaching the threshold of 1,000,000 divine power. The barrier of Dragon God Mountain could withstand it. But not for long. At the mountaintop, Elder Blue also noticed it, hastening the contraction of the barrier to gather stronger defense. Destroy it! Gula stood up, lightly lifting his finger, and threw the scorching black sun towards Dragon God Mountain. With a crash, space was consumed by the burning, revealing the void. The black sun continued to approach the barrier. Dragon God Mountain trembled. The entire Dragon God Mountain was a treasure, but it couldn't withstand such a powerful attack. Buzz! The black sun collided with the barrier, emitting strange sounds continuously. Outsiders watched with curiosity, speculating whether this attack could break the barrier. People from the Dragon God Mountain continued to gather divine power and inject it into the barrier. They assisted Blue in shrinking the barrier to the mountaintop. Only then could they firmly withstand this strike. These Palunga clan guys claim to be the #1 group, right? But this barrier is too weak. Wuli complained while earnestly channeling his own divine power into the barrier. Jian Wushuang also wanted to do the same, but his current amount of divine power wasn't quite enough. Even with the power of the beast god multiplied by 5, he only had 600,000 divine power. On the field, even a casual 5th Tribulation Realm expert had 700,000 divine power. However, there were also many elite 4th Tribulation Realm experts among the Palunga clan. Those who could stay in the Holy Land were all very powerful. Even 4th Tribulation Realm experts had 600,000 divine power. Jian Wushuang's strength wasn't considered particularly strong among these people. Boom! The sound of explosion resounded, and the terrifying power reached its peak. Blue's eyes flickered, and a golden light burst from his body, causing his cloak to flutter wildly. With a roar, he single-handedly shrunk the barrier to the mountaintop. Hoo-hoo! Blue gasped for breath. Evidently shrinking the barrier wasn't easy. Jian Wushuang frowned. He felt the other party was being overly cautious. Even if the barrier withstood the previous attack, it wouldn't have broken. Why waste their divine power? What would they do when they went out to fight later? Just now, he could feel Blue's divine power reaching 900,000. It was the Dragon God Mountain, and Blue was the #1 combat force of the Palunga clan. It must be maintained at its peak. He wanted to rush up and help Blue restore his divine power. Unfortunately, he couldn't. He could only smile bitterly. Dan Bao stood at the back. Seeing Blue's aura weaken significantly, he cautiously approached and placed his hands on Blue's body. A green light burst forth, and Blue's divine power instantly reached its peak. The other Palunga clan members didn't find this unusual, but both Jian Wushuang and Wu Li were astonished. Life! Wu Li exclaimed in shock. Jian Wushuang observed carefully and corrected. It's the divine power of all things transformed. All things transformed? Cold light flashed in Wu Li's eyes, and the Trey ant within him began to stir. After Blue restored to his peak, he patted Danbao's head, lowered his head to look at him, and said gently, "Thank you." When he raised his head again, a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Everyone, we can guard the Dragon God Mountain and suppress all directions. Follow me into battle." Blue waved his hand, and a formation appeared on the ground. Then he said, "Let's go." Swish! Dozens of people on the mountaintop left together. When they appeared again, they were already at the foot of the mountain. The fighting spirit made Jian Wushuang tremble. At this moment, he wanted to join the Palunga clan and descend the mountain to battle. Seeing everyone leaving, Wu Li's courage grew, and he dragged his fingers across the ground, asking, "Little Danbao, can you open this barrier?" "Can't do it. Only the Grand Elder and Elder Blue can open it." Danbao shook his head. Jian Wushuang, however, walked toward the edge of the cliff, gazing outwards. It was chaos. With the barrier contracted, the outside world was no longer visible. They could only perceive it through telepathy. Unfortunately, they couldn't witness this ultimate showdown. As he lamented, Danbao took out the crystal ball common among the Palunga clan and squatted down, staring at it. This made both Wu Li and him envious. Noticing their gaze, Danbao spoke. "Benefactors want to watch together? We can see too?" Jian Wushuang asked in surprise. They couldn't see the images in the crystal ball. It seemed only the strong of the Palunga clan could see the outside world through it. But Danbao nodded firmly and affirmed, "Of course. You just need to infuse your telepathy into this crystal ball to see the battle outside." "That's fantastic." Wu Li immediately stepped forward and infused his telepathy. Jian Wushuang followed suit. After infusing their telepathy, they indeed saw the outside scene. It was incredibly miraculous, similar to the heavenly canopy. Their gaze followed the crystal ball down to the mountain below. Blue led the way, followed by over 35th Tribulation experts and hundreds of 4th Tribulation experts. Their opponents, however, had over 105th Tribulation experts and 7 6th Tribulation experts. This isn't even counting Gula. Counting Gula, they might not withstand a single round. Gula had no intention of joining the battle. He raised his head and chuckled. This is truly interesting. Kinyu, get your people ready for battle. After a moment's thought, he added, the rest of you, don't interfere. It would be too boring otherwise. After saying this, he glanced at the strong individuals among the human race. He wasn't worried. The human race would send out more strong individuals. Sure enough, when the Empress saw that Gula wasn't joining the fight and instead had Kinyu and the other 5-6 Tribulation Realm individuals step forward, she thought they were conserving their strength and naturally didn't mobilize more forces. Yao Yu, you lead the charge this time. The Empress turned to the Wolf King Yao Yu of the Celestial Wolf Clan and said. The strong individuals of the Celestial Wolf Clan were momentarily stunned, but they had no other choice. From the 16 kingdoms of the green grass, strong individuals emerged, forming a group of 6 at the 5th Tribulation Realm and 72 at the 4th Tribulation Realm. In the Hidden Realm, there were 36 at the 5th Tribulation Realm and 400 at the 4th Tribulation Realm. This accounted for about a third of the human race's strength. It was similar to Gula's side. After all, apart from Kinyu and his group of 6 Tribulation Realm individuals, there were only a dozen or so at the 5th Tribulation Realm among Gula's forces. Their strength was like air. This confrontation was just a test. If possible, the Empress hoped that these individuals, along with Kinyu and the Palunga clan's strong individuals, would perish together. Then she and the remaining forces would have a chance to defeat Gula, to become the ultimate victor. But this idea was too idealistic. Jian Wushuang, who was watching from the sidelines, breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Gula didn't directly intervene. At the same time, he prayed in his heart that Elder Blue would replace the participating strong individuals. This might lead to internal discord among the human race before they confronted Gula, because there weren't many strong individuals from the Palunga clan. If they all perished, the remaining Dragon Balls would be within grasp. Indeed, it was the moment for the human race and Gula to determine victory or defeat. When the time came, they would witness another peak confrontation, with the potential to sway the outcome. Jian Wushuang had already begun gathering his qi, prepared to strike at any side at any moment. Of course, he hoped the human race would emerge victorious. That way, he could cooperate with them to ensure the safety of the remaining members of the Palunga clan. However, Wu Li didn't share the same sentiment. Observing the balance of power, he shook his head and sighed. I think it would be better if the Elder handed over the Dragon Ball. That way, everyone could watch the human race battle Gula. You're overthinking it, Danbao retorted. No one wants a neutral party to exist. Even if Gula seems indifferent to this battle, they wouldn't allow any variables to disrupt it. Besides, the strong members of our Palunga clan might not necessarily lose. We won't let ourselves be ambushed and slaughtered. After speaking, he cast a disdainful glance at Wu Li. Jian Wushuang shared the same disdain. Disdaining Wu Li showed no hint of the dignity of a strong individual. If everyone thought like that, there would be no conflict, and without conflict, there would be no strong individuals. Wouldn't it be better if everyone just idled away under the Emperor's rule? Let's watch the situation first. The three of them sat around the crystal ball, unconsciously pulling out some fruit wine. Wu Li felt something was missing, so he took out a leg of a wild beast from his mustard seed and quickly set up a grill, putting the leg on it. With a flick of his finger, a magical flame ignited. At first, Jian Wushuang felt it was somewhat inappropriate, but the scent of the meat wafted over, stirring his desire for divine consumption. So he held back. Seizing the opportunity, he took out a small, delicate bone knife and began to eat while drinking. The flesh and blood of the wild beast contained powerful divine power. Unfortunately, his divine power couldn't be further enhanced at the moment. He could only savor this delicacy. Danbao, smelling the aroma of the meat, looked at Jian Wushuang with embarrassment. Understanding his unspoken thoughts, Jian Wushuang took out a small knife adorned with precious gems and passed it over. Three of them drank wine, ate meat, and watched the brutal battles outside. Down the mountain, terrifying divine powers erupted one after another. A battle was about to break out. Blue stared at Gula, then glanced at the empress of the human race, transmitting his voice to the people behind him. This is an opportunity. We need to act fast. Quickly deal with these people. There's a chance. Although not of the wise Palunga clan, Blue possessed exceptional combat talent. The enemy employed the worst strategy. Indeed, this was their chance. They just needed to seize the moment before the opponents could react, erupt in an instant, and kill or seriously injure all the opponents who joined the battle. There was no time to delay. Delaying would lead to being caught in a protracted battle. The people behind nodded silently. The plan had been made. On the other hand, the strong individuals from the human race and the Kinyu tribe appeared relaxed. Kinyu flexed his wrist and spoke, "Leave the strongest one to me. The rest you guys can handle yourselves. That skinny one, leave it to me. I'll deal with the fat one." They seemed to be dividing the prey among themselves. The strong individuals from the human race couldn't help but feel relieved upon hearing this. If they could take out all the 6th Tribulation Realm experts, then the remaining 5th Tribulation Realm ones would not pose much of a threat. Yao Yu of the Celestial Wolf clan was the strongest, accompanied by over 45th Tribulation Realm experts, while the Palunga side had only 30-something 5th Tribulation Realm experts. Some of them had to be allocated to deal with the 6th Tribulation Realm experts, leaving less than 20. The human race, however, had twice the number of people, and each one of them was a universe master with stable combat power. The advantage was with the human race. Blue also sensed Kinyu's fighting spirit and immediately shouted, leading the charge, "Kill!" The people behind him followed suit. "Kill! Kill! Kill!" The shouts shook Dragon God Mountain. Kinyu led his group, intercepting several 6th Tribulation Realm powerhouses led by Elder Blue, opting to engage them in mid-air combat. Meanwhile, those of the 5th Tribulation Realm were entangled below, mingling with those of the 4th Tribulation Realm. The battle had barely begun, yet it was already chaotic. Although the human side had many strong warriors, they lacked any cohesive strategy. It was essentially every man for himself. Individual skirmishes broke out. The strong warriors of the kingdoms huddled together for warmth. However, the experts from the secret realms were neither united nor familiar with each other, thus had to fight separately. This gave the Palunga clan a significant advantage. Elder Jones and Zack shuttled back and forth, each attracting over 10 5th Tribulation Realm powerhouses. This also eased the pressure on the other members of the Palunga clan. Both Elder Jones and Zack were of the 5th Tribulation Realm, with divine power of only about 750,000 each. They were no match for dozens of 5th Tribulation Realm universe masters. But they persisted. They held on until Blue erupted. The central battle, however, raged in the sky. Blue faced off against Kinyu, while the 4 holy sons of the Palunga clan held off the 5 6th Tribulation experts brought by Kinyu. The core battle circle was currently evenly matched. The fight between Kinyu and Blue had only just begun, and victory was not forthcoming so quickly. Furthermore, Kinyu had not yet unleashed his full strength, toying with Blue the entire time. "Haha! I thought your strength was decent, but it turns out you're so weak." Kinyu dodged Blue's punch, kicked him in the chest, sending him crashing into the melee of 5th Tribulation Realm fighters below. However, that kick fell right into Blue's trap. As Blue fell among the human warriors, he extended his hand and, from top to bottom, executed a deep push, instantly killing several 5th Tribulation Realm powerhouses. Observing Blue's actions from the sky, Kinyu remained unperturbed by his opponent's tactics. However, not wanting to waste time, he leisurely descended to actively seek out Blue. Meanwhile, Zack and Elder Jones had attracted dozens of 5th Tribulation Realm universe masters behind them and had arrived by Blue's side. The three nodded to each other. Blue's hands emitted countless light waves, directly attacking the approaching 5th Tribulation Realm universe masters. Boom! 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 The losses on the side of the human race were catastrophic in an instant. Even the Empress furrowed her brow. However, she wasn't planning to send any more reinforcements, because she had already noticed that Gula didn't care about this battle at all. Moreover, Kinyu and the others had been mocking the strong warriors of the Palunga clan. Since that was the case, she decided to let them have their fun. It would be best if they all ended up in ruins together. You coward! Can you only bully the weaklings of the fifth tribulation realm? Kinyu dove down to the ground. He intercepted Elder Blue's attack. With a lift of his hand, he easily deflected the divine power waves sent by Blue. If I don't sweep away these small fries, I have no interest in fighting you. Blue sneered coldly and swiftly increased his speed to create distance once again. He began to slaughter the fifth tribulation realm warriors on the side of the secret realm. The strong warriors of the four major kingdoms had already retreated to the outermost edges, fearing being involved. Kinyu missed again, his expression turning cold as he attempted to kill a few warriors of the Palunga clan, only to find that they were all hiding behind Elder Blue. This greatly infuriated him. They were looking down on him. They were actually avoiding the battle. Since that's the case, then let me lend you a hand. Kinyu bared his fangs and looked towards the fifth tribulation realm warriors around him. He extended 2 fingers, raised them suddenly, and a terrifying power instantly swept through the surroundings. Whether they were strong warriors from the human race or the Palunga clan, they all turned into powder. Even the dragon god mountain cracked open halfway. The 3 spectators on the mountaintop hurriedly picked up the wine jug on the ground, fearing it would spill. Ready to take me on now? Kinyu extended his hand, his expression cold and stern. Elder Blue hadn't expected his opponent to be so ruthless, launching a relentless assault without discrimination. The Empress watched the scene unfold, merely taking a deep breath without uttering a word. For her, it was nothing new. She had sacrificed much to become the Holy Maiden. This time, she couldn't afford to lose. No matter how many died, it couldn't be helped. And the powerful figures from the kingdoms behind her, or the experts from the secret realms, were also watching coldly. Most of the human race's strong participants had joined the battle, leaving none behind. With no one left below, who would speak for them now? It would be best if they all perished. The human races strong on the field were also unlucky. Without the protection of the sixth tribulation realm, they were slaughtered like lambs. Having finished bullying, Blue was about to join in, too. Thanks! Blue's lips curled into a smile as he soared into the air. Currently, most of the sixth tribulation realm on the ground belonged to their Palunga clan. If they didn't step up, Kinyu would soon target their Palunga clan's sixth tribulation realm experts. Seeing this, Kinyu also soared into the sky, ready to clash with Blue once more. Elder Jones and Zack, on the other hand, wore grim expressions as they surrounded the human race's sixth tribulation realm experts. Currently, the advantage was theirs. The human race side now only had 7 or 8 sixth tribulation realm experts left. Without the Empress's command, they couldn't retreat. If they retreated, the Empress would probably kill them. If only we had known, why bother attending this feast of slaughter? Some of the sixth tribulation realm experts had already despaired. The massacre of this Holy Maiden assembly had only just begun. Scenes of entire teams being wiped out, which were rare in the past, were now happening one after another. The powerful sixth tribulation realm experts of the Palunga clan, with a huge advantage, chose to engage in one-on-one combat to delay some of the human race's sixth tribulation realm universe masters. The rest went to surround and kill the remaining human race's sixth tribulation realm universe masters. The efficiency was extremely high. In just the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, more than 40 universe masters from the human race side were all slain. The fourth tribulation realm universe masters met the same fate. It was tragic. Apart from Jian Wushuang and Wu Li, who were still fighting, there were also those old folks from the ancient Wuxia's Holy Land watching. Seeing all the experts from their kingdoms or secret realms falling, these scattered tribulation experts were furious. They all blamed the Yue Kingdom. The Yue Kingdom's seventh tribulation realm patriarch, however, kept his eyes tightly shut. He had grown accustomed to being scolded. Li Shang had transformed into a savage beast and was scolded once. Jian Wushuang had joined the Palunga clan and was scolded once again. Now, it was Empress Function's turn to watch her subordinates go to their deaths without batting an eye. Every time it was their Yue Kingdom stirring up trouble. Although they were scolded, deep down they were secretly pleased. It would be best if I died. If I were to die, it better be clean. Only Fengchen remained. Even if the mission couldn't be completed, the position of the Holy Maiden would undoubtedly fall into Fengchen's hands. Surprisingly, that's exactly what the Empress was thinking right now. Of course, this was just the worst-case scenario. She still wanted to defeat Gula with her own strength and complete this mission. To become the Holy Maiden once again. It didn't matter how many strong individuals from the human clan died. It had nothing to do with her. She wasn't worried about being troubled by external forces. She was already the universe master of the Sixth Tribulation Realm now. And she was at the peak of the Sixth Tribulation Realm. Although she hadn't reached the level of the half-step Seventh Tribulation Realm yet, once she went out and became the Holy Maiden, she would soon reach that level. When the scattered tribulations arrive, will they still fear them? They were the future generation of Seventh Tribulation Universe Masters. The ancient Wood sect will also be preserved. Now, those who have died are all worthy. With success, 10,000 bones wither. The battle below has already ended. The strong of the Palunga clan, at minimal cost, have slain all the experts of the Fifth Tribulation Realm and the Fourth Tribulation's realm. Now only watching remains, waiting for Blue's eruption. The battle in mid-air is particularly intense. The four great holy sons of Dragon God Mountain are engaged in a back-and-forth battle with Kinyu's subordinates. All of them possess over 800,000 divine powers. For a moment, victory or defeat cannot be discerned. It still depends on Blue. Blue is the core. Kinyu is the same. Currently, in their battle, Kinyu is slightly gaining the upper hand. Kinyu, with 900,000 divine power, is facing off against Blue, who has 890,000 divine power. Both of them are great masters of divine power. They are not using any treasures, simply exchanging blows with fists and feet, as well as waves of divine power, causing the heavens and earth to lose color. Boom! After the two collide again, they each step back, creating distance, looking for the next opportunity to strike. Who? After catching his breath, Kinyu loudly says, "That was exhilarating. It's been so long since I've encountered such a formidable opponent. I really don't want to settle things with you so quickly." Blue sneers, glancing at the people below, his voice cold. "I really want to see how powerful your divine power is, whether it's as formidable as I imagine." "Ha ha!" Kinyu laughs. With both hands clenched, he roars, and his divine power directly breaks through 900,000. "Then let me tell you, my divine power is 930,000. Kinyu begins to erupt, the veins on his forehead bulging, and his divine power begins to soar. The later it gets, the more difficult it becomes for divine power to increase each time. Often, a difference of 10,000 or 20,000 can determine the outcome. As Kinyu continues to erupt, he truly reaches a divine power 930,000. The Empress took a deep breath. She had anticipated Kinyu's strength, but she hadn't expected it to reach 930,000. Even Gula was excited, loudly praising, "Kinyu, your progress is remarkable. Great King, watch closely. Once I have slain him, I will deal with the rest." Kinyu, after completely unleashing his power, became even more relaxed. In midair, he made a series of strange movements. Below, Gula's face reddened, murmuring softly, "Here we go again." Seeing the opponent's outburst, Elder Blue's expression changed. Kinyu's divine power exceeded his expectations. But 930,000 did not mean he couldn't be defeated. "Ah!" Elder Blue clenched his fist, shouting angrily, and his divine power began to surge. "Ha!" The white skin behind him was shattered. His divine power directly reached 900,000. Kinyu remained calm, commenting, 900,000. Not bad at all. If you weren't from the Palunga clan, you could have joined my Kinyu Special Forces." Just as he finished speaking, he noticed that Elder Blue's divine power had reached 910,000. "You still have reserves, but 910,000 should be your limit," Kinyu casually evaluated. However, Elder Blue's lips curled upwards, roaring once again, and his divine power unexpectedly surged by 20,000, reaching 930,000. This already equaled Kinyu's. Kinyu felt a bit panicked. He hadn't expected his opponent to be this powerful. And the crucial point was that Elder Blue's aura was still rising. 940,000. Kinyu's face changed drastically. 950,000. The onlookers below also exclaimed in shock. The Empress's face changed color. On the mountaintop, Wu Li was even more fascinated. Seeing Elder Blue erupt with 950,000 divine power, firmly suppressing Kinyu, he happily pulled Danbao to celebrate together. As long as the strong warriors of the Palunga clan could hold their ground, the two of them could escape. Seeing Elder Blue's divine power erupt naturally filled him with joy. How about it? Are you satisfied with the 950,000 divine power? Blue moved his neck slightly and smirked. A flash brought him directly behind Kinyu. His arm gently raised. Then an elbow struck Kinyu's neck. Kinyu's mind sank, just as he came to clarity, wanting to counterattack, only to find Blue's figure nowhere to be seen. I'm right here. Blue appeared in front of Kinyu again, seemingly out of nowhere, and with a headbutt, sent Kinyu flying tens of thousands of feet away. Blue wasn't in a hurry to deal with Kinyu. After repelling him, he effortlessly joined the battle with the four great holy sons. Once he entered the fray, it was a slaughter. Below, Gula grew anxious. Quick! Stop him! Kinyu desperately rushed back. But Blue had already dealt with a sixth Tribulation Realm powerhouse. 950,000 against over 800,000 divine power of the sixth Tribulation Realm was overwhelming. Now the four great holy sons were evenly matched against the six Tribulation Realm members of Kinyu's special forces. Completely balanced. But Blue had a significant advantage against Kinyu. Now it's time to end this battle. Blue's eyes revealed a murderous intent. With his right hand gripping his left arm, he began to distance his divine power. At his fingertips, a power that could not be shaken had already formed. Gula below hurriedly reminded, Quick! Dodge! But it was already too late. Blue pointed his finger at Kinyu and shouted, Demon light kill waves! A beam of light instantly shot out. Kinyu's figure froze for a moment, trying to dodge but couldn't escape, because the demon light kill waves could lock onto him, leaving no room for escape. He could only block with both arms in front of his chest. Boom! The divine power condensed in this beam exceeded 950,000. It reached 980,000. This was Blue's limit, and it was his ultimate move. Enough to kill Kinyu instantly, just when everyone thought Kinyu was doomed. As Kinyu blocked with both arms in front, an imperceptible smile crossed his face. This detail was noticed by Jian Wushuang. Not good. It's a trap. Just as Jian Wushuang finished speaking, a change occurred. After the light beam pierced through Kinyu's chest, Kinyu disappeared. Elder Blue was also startled. This was his strongest skill, impossible to evade. As he was surprised, the beam of light suddenly changed direction, heading towards Blue. How is this possible? Blue exclaimed. This attack was supposed to track the enemy. Now it was coming towards him, which meant Kinyu was behind him. When he tried to turn around, he found himself restrained from behind by Kinyu. Kinyu's arms were like a cage, firmly binding Blue. Ha! You're going to die by your own skill. Kinyu sneered coldly. And I am the ultimate victor. With Blue blocking in front, the attacks he received would indeed be significantly reduced. Blue panicked as well. He knew his ultimate skill very well. If he took such a hit, he would be severely injured if not dead. If he were seriously injured with only the four great holy sons left, they would be unable to stop Gula. But Kinyu had him locked down and he couldn't break free. Ah! At the last moment, Blue roared in anger, and his divine power surged once again. Golden light shimmered all over his body, and he broke free from Kinyu's grasp directly. Below, Gula narrowed his eyes. In the instant Elder Blue erupted, his divine power approached 1,000,000. This couldn't be ignored. Gula's eyes narrowed, directly immobilizing Blue in midair. rendering him unable to move. Although it was just a moment. But Kinyu reacted faster, once again locking down Blue. Just as Blue's eruption occurred, it instantly subsided. However, it still greatly shocked Kinyu. The terrifying divine power just now was almost over 1,000,000. Thinking about this, there was a moment of fear. But this time, Blue was completely finished. A beam of light surged, piercing Blue's chest directly, shattering his divine body, collapsing his origin source. Only a breath remained. Kinyu, who had Blue locked down, didn't fare any better. This time, his chest was pierced again. Not a residual image but a real blow. Even though the light beam weakened after passing through Blue, Kinyu's own divine power was nowhere near as strong as Blue's. So his situation was similar to Blue's, both severely injured. But he had a trick up his sleeve. Reaching into his mustard seed, he retrieved a fruit and gulped it down. His divine power continued to rise, while Blue had already fallen. Jones and Zack on the ground hurried forward to help but were directly injured and pushed back by Gula's stare. The Empress's eyes also flickered. She had hoped Blue would defeat Kinyu and then provoke Gula to intervene. Now Gula had intervened, but not completely. It seemed she needed to lend a hand. Whoosh! The Empress, Fengchen, flashed and appeared in midair. Kinyu, seeing Fengchen behind him, was startled, trying to retreat hastily. But his body involuntarily trembled, unable to move. Empress Fengchen, with a flick of her red lips and a blink of her icy eyes, left only a corpse in front of her when she opened them again. Kinyu, with a divine power of up to 920,000, died instantly. Although injured, he could recover to over 800,000 divine power. But he died just like that. At the mountaintop, Jian Wushuang stared at the crystal ball, his eyes trembling. He hadn't even seen clearly when the Empress made her move. Kinyu was annihilated. You shall accompany him in death. The Empress pointed her finger at her waist, lightly tapping to immobilize the 4 Sixth Tribulation's realm beings. The 4 holy sons of the Palunga clan were surprised when the Empress made a move against Kinyu and his people. But they didn't hesitate. They immediately took action. Without any hesitation, they slew all 4 of Kinyu's subordinates. Then, one by one, they descended to the ground and stood before Elder Blue. Gula furrowed his brow, casting a glance at the few worthless individuals behind him, then looked up at the sky. This game shouldn't end so soon. At that moment, Gula stood up for the first time and stepped down from the throne. Despite his small and frail figure, Gula was undoubtedly the strongest presence in the field. A sudden surge of energy shook the entire Dragon God Mountain. Jian Wushuang, who was watching from the mountaintop, turned pale. He hurriedly said to Dan Bao, "Quick, bring Blue back. The Empress of the human race won't be able to withstand Gula. Bring Blue back to restore his divine power and let him join the battle again." Dan Bao hesitated for a moment, but he thought Jian Wushuang's words made sense. He then relayed the message to Blue and the others. The powerful members of the Palunga clan at the foot of the mountain also understood the terror of Gula. They were no match for him at all. Taking advantage of Blue's partial recovery, they quickly activated the formation of the Dragon God Mountain and sent Blue back. Whoosh! A circular black hole appeared in midair, and Blue's body leaped into it. With blood still staining his lips, Blue fell to the ground, and Dan Bao rushed forward to help him recover. But Blue's injuries were too severe to heal quickly. Jian Wushuang could only feel anxious as he looked at the crystal ball. The remaining strong members of the Palunga clan should also return. Staying here would only mean death. Gula personally entered the fray. The Empress was also prepared to fight. The 2 strongest figures confronted each other. The Empress stood in midair, hands on her hips, staring at Gula, while secretly communicating with the strong members of the human race. When she engaged Gula, the other strong members of the human race would take the opportunity to kill all of Gula's remaining subordinates. Not a single one would be spared, and they would snatch the dragon balls as well. They couldn't let those people freeload around. Gula flexed his wrist and calmly said, "Shall we begin?" "Any time." The Empress suddenly retreated, sleeves flicking, and thousands of crimson threads flew out. The red sleeves completely surrounded Gula, trapped in a cocoon. Attack! The dozens of fifth-stage realm strongmen from the human race surged forward like a torrent, directly charging towards Gula's remaining forces. Only a dozen or so fifth tribulation strongmen remained who could hold back the human army. Li Shang was in a panic, desperately wanting to shout out loud to show that they were on the same side. But as the words reached his lips, he realized he looked like a wild beast. Speaking out wouldn't make anyone believe him. Even if they did believe, nobody would hold back. He decided to unleash his divine power and prepare to escape. The remaining followers of Gula, especially Sabo after his transformation, could withstand for a while. But the rest were powerless to resist and were quickly surrounded and overwhelmed. Though Gula was enveloped, he could still sense the commotion below. With a sudden force, he broke free from his restraints and saw countless people below trying to snatch his dragon balls, which made him furious. He wanted to intervene to stop those universe masters of the human race. But the Empress wasn't going to let him go. Her sleeves attacked once again, this time with her own universe treasure, fully mastered at the 6th tribulation level. Even with Gula's immense divine power, breaking through quickly was impossible. Both sides struggled with their divine power. The Empress's divine power quickly reached 990,000, but breaking 1,000,000 was not so easy. Gula's divine power, on the other hand, remained around 1,000,000. For a moment they were deadlocked. Meanwhile, the battle below was nearing its end. Li Shang, desperate to save his life, grabbed a dragon ball and fled without trembling like the others. He wanted to run to the Empress's side and inform her of his identity. Gula, however, mistook Li Shang's action as protecting the dragon ball and greatly admired it. His divine power erupted again, skyrocketing from 1.08 million, directly pushing away the Empress and snatching Li Shang. After I deal with these people, I'll come back to settle the score with you. Gula's eyes flashed with killing intent. The Empress, pushed back, was extremely shocked by Gula's divine power, which could erupt to 1.08 million. If that was Gula's strongest divine power, she might still have hope. The human universe masters below, who were still fighting over the dragon balls, were stunned when they saw Gula charging towards them. They cursed the Empress for being useless and unable to stop Gula, yet still insisting on letting them fight for the dragon balls. Feng Chun no longer cared about those people. Without even glancing at them, he turned to look at the several 6th tribulation strongmen of the Palunga clan. Gula, with Li Shang in tow, approached the human universe masters with a dark expression on his face. "Even you lowlifes dare to snatch my treasures," Gula roared, sending the crowd back with sheer force. But it didn't end there. With a swift movement, he appeared in front of a 5th tribulation realm expert holding a dragon ball, crushing their skull with a claw and tossing the dragon ball to Li Shang. Li Shang caught it steadily. Again, another 5th tribulation realm universe master fell to Gula's hands. The rest stood frozen, paralyzed with fear. There was no strength left for resistance. If they all attacked together, they might all be annihilated by Gula. This holy gathering, I have no hope at all. It's time to give up. This thought echoed in everyone's mind. 4th tribulation experts began to retreat and flee for their lives. Despite Gula's rage, he had no intention of letting any of them escape. Launching into the air, he pointed his fingers and shot out beams of light, each capable of instantly killing a 5th tribulation expert. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of beams of light filled the sky. Everyone present was targeted for annihilation. Meanwhile, Li Shang was surrounded by 4 dragon balls, but his eyes were fixed on the corpses littering the ground. Gula clenched his fist lightly, coughed dryly, and muttered, "Filthy creatures!" The sight of the corpses made him extremely uncomfortable. With a wave of his hand, a powerful storm erupted, instantly leveling everything within thousands of miles. The corpses vanished without a trace. It was a scene that shook the heart. Unfortunately, there were few human experts left on the scene. The Empress paid no mind to this, currently persuading the strong members of the Palunga clan to cooperate. Jian Wushuang and Wu Li were not present, but they would have been stunned if they were. Only Li Sheng witnessed everything firsthand, with his own eyes. Although he didn't particularly care about the fate of these people, witnessing so many powerful individuals being slaughtered by Gula left him trembling with fear. At the same time, he felt a sense of relief. He was grateful that he had transformed into a savage beast. The next time he saw Jian Wushuang, bowing his head a few times in deference would be considered courteous. He was determined to express his gratitude properly. Thinking about it, despite spending so much time among the human race, he hadn't reaped as much benefit in a month as he did by becoming a savage beast. Perhaps it was because in the face of such a great opportunity, everyone had a chance. This opportunity had allowed him to reach the peak of the fifth tribulation. Even though he had become a savage beast, he never regretted it. Gula, sir. Li Sheng bowed deeply, having completely become a lackey of the human race. As Gula passed by Li Sheng, heading towards the direction of the Empress and the strong members of the Palunga clan, he spoke as he passed Li Sheng. Keep an eye on the Dragon Balls. Once I've killed these people, I promise to help you break into the sixth tribulation realm. As soon as these words left Gula's mouth, Li Sheng's expression changed several times. Help you break into the sixth tribulation realm. These words echoed in Li Sheng's ears repeatedly. The sixth tribulation realm. He was still a universe master. That meant being a universe master of the sixth tribulation realm. In the ancient Wood continent, they were all prominent figures. He could even establish a secret realm, allowing his family to relocate there and become regional rulers. A universe master of the sixth tribulation realm. Wherever he went, he would be highly regarded. He could even venture into dangerous secret realms to gradually solidify his own strength and strive towards the seventh tribulation realm. The temptation was too great for Li Sheng. He had to consider whether this was the greatest opportunity of his life. Once missed, he might regret it for the rest of his life. Sixth tribulation realm, Li Sheng murmured. It was a realm he had never dared to imagine. Before entering the infinite great world, the most arrogant thing he had said in the Li family was that he could rank in the top 3 among the fourth tribulation realm experts of Yu Kingdom. However, there weren't many universe masters in the fourth tribulation realm from the kingdom of Yu to begin with. Ranked in the top 3 was nothing to boast about. In the blink of an eye, he witnessed dozens of universe masters in the fifth tribulation realm fall, along with hundreds, even thousands, in the fourth tribulation realm. Here, those in the fourth tribulation realm were like weeds, while those in the fifth tribulation realm were mere ants. Even those in the sixth tribulation realm couldn't sway the course of the battle. Everything that happened today indeed exceeded his previous experiences and understanding. This couldn't help but cause a slight change in his mood. Seeing Gula steadily approaching, the Empress furrowed her brow. She still couldn't persuade the Palunga clan's members to strengthen their forces. They could only fight separately. What a bunch of fools! The Empress didn't want to confront Gula directly in order to preserve her divine power, especially when alone. With a flicker, she attempted to rush towards Dragon God Mountain. But Gula preempted her, blocking the Empress's path. In such a hurry, where do you think you're going? His speed surpassed everyone's mental abilities once again. It was impossible to even see clearly. At the mountaintop, Jian Wushuang anxiously asked, "Is it not ready yet?" The Empress wouldn't stand a chance against Gula alone. If she fell, the remaining people wouldn't have much hope either. There might not even be a chance for him and Wu Li to escape. Blue must join forces with the Empress to confront Gula. That's the only hope. If necessary, he could use the super-eternal ancient transformation and launch a surprise attack on Gula. And he still had a trick up his sleeve, Li Sheng. But he didn't know that Li Sheng had already gone mad. He was immersed in delusions about the sixth tribulation realm. Phew! Danbao sat directly on the ground, while Blue's aura reached its peak. But judging from Danbao's complexion, he must have reached his limit. His life force couldn't be compared. But being able to restore a sixth tribulation divine power to a super powerhouse with a strength of 950,000 was quite remarkable. If this were to be revealed, regardless of the faction, he would be an esteemed guest. It's no wonder the Grand Elder and the elders of the Holy Land valued Danbao so much. Moreover, it was once said that if the Holy Land were to fall, he would take Danbao and flee. It seems that Danbao also harbored some significant secrets. Quick! Those outside can't hold on much longer. Jian Wushuang glanced at the crystal ball and then turned to Blue, saying, "There's a chance of winning if you join forces with the human empress." In reality, he knew best whether they would win or not. Without Gula's transformation, he had a divine power of 1.08 million. Now, with Blue and the Empress teaming up, there was indeed a slight chance of winning. But they definitely couldn't win against Gula after his transformation. But if they didn't join forces, they would only await death. Blue also looked at the crystal ball, but he had no intention of cooperating with the Empress. "Prepare to escape while you can." His gaze shifted, and he glanced at the house where the Grand Elder was located, a surge of fighting spirit rising once again. With those words, he disappeared from where he stood. And when he reappeared, he was already at the foot of the mountain. The battle between the Empress and Gula continued. But Gula, who was fighting, seemed extremely relaxed. After all, there was still some gap between the two sides. After Blue appeared, he didn't waste any time and went straight for Gula. Although the Empress had also killed members of the Palunga clan, her biggest opponent now was Gula. Dealing with Gula first and then dealing with the Empress would not be too late. "Haha! Just in time. If you hadn't come out, I might have fallen asleep." Gula yawned, standing in midair with one hand on his hip, scanning the two with a slight smirk, then suddenly dashed out. The speed was simply beyond comprehension. The Empress's divine power, though slightly stronger than Elder Blue's, struggled to withstand the onslaught. But even at his peak, Elder Blue could only muster up to 950,000 divine power, a far cry from Gula's 1.08 million. They were utterly overwhelmed from the start. With just one punch, Gula sent Elder Blue plummeting from the sky. Then he turned towards the Empress and, missing his initial kick, seamlessly transitioned into a palm strike. Boom! The Empress also fell from the sky. Too weak. Gula shook his head as he descended from the heavens. Elder Blue rose again and charged. The Empress also approached from another direction. But their joint assault was in vain. Gula leaped up, spreading his arms and unleashing two powerful shockwaves that sent Elder Blue and the Empress flying back thousands of yards, crashing into the mountains. Other strong members of the Palunga clan wanted to intervene but found themselves powerless. The four holy princes only possessed just over 800,000 power each. Rushing in would only lead to their demise. Elder Jones stepped forward, his face dark, and addressed the four holy sons. "It's time to use our last resort." The four holy sons were taken aback, but when they looked at Gula, they fell silent. On the mountaintop, Jian Wushuang glimpsed the conversation among Elder Jones and the others through a crystal ball, but couldn't hear their words. He asked, "Danbao, what are they doing? Planning a strategy?" "I think they're planning to flee. What else can they do? They're getting crushed. It's better to flee early and give the Dragon Ball to Gula." Wu Li shook his head, sighing. Danbao ignored Wu Li and turned to Jian Wushuang, explaining, "Elder Jones might resort to the strongest secret technique of our Palunga clan." "The strongest secret technique?" Jian Wushuang and Wu Li exclaimed simultaneously. "What's the strongest secret technique?" "The fusion technique." Danbao stood up, glanced at the elder's house, then continued, "The fusion technique that creates the super Palunga warrior." "A super warrior?" Danbao's explanation left Jian Wushuang shocked to the core. The fusion art of the Palunga clan was exceptionally unique, because the entire Palunga clan's bloodline originated from the Great Elder. They could actually merge. For example, when a wise Palunga person merges with a combat-oriented one, a super warrior with both wisdom and combat prowess is born. Elder Blue's immense strength stemmed from such a fusion. Fusion technique. Jian Wushuang muttered softly. This reminded him of the mountain lords of the Qixin temple. Shan Jun, Gu Jun, Mo Jun, originally manifestations of the Tao of the Qixin. Later, Shan Jun further differentiated into Heart Demon, 10,000 demon, wind demon, blood demon. They could differentiate and merge again. That's why Mieshang led them on this path. Once merged again, they could regain their peak. Just the Mo Jun alone was at the level of the 6th tribulation realm. Mo, Gu, and Shan combined as one. Even without the Qixin's peak strength, they probably had the top combat power of the 7th tribulation realm. Qixin of old was even a half-step 8th tribulation realm, even capable of matching an 8th tribulation realm. Devouring a Dao was the peak path of the Qixin, just like Jian Wushuang's sword Dao. Could it be that ordinary? I hope there will be miracles. Jian Wushuang focused again on the fight below the mountain. The Empress and Elder Blue had already suffered considerable injuries. If this continued, death was inevitable. On the side of the 4 Holy Sons, they were surrounded in the center by dozens of 5th Tribulation Realm experts and hundreds of 4th Tribulation Realm strongmen. Elder Jones closed his eyes slightly and said calmly, "Let's begin!" Buzz. Hundreds of auras began to converge. A majestic aura suddenly burst forth. In the distance, Gula paused for a moment, then turned to look at those strong Palunga clan members, sneering. Any more surprises? Originally prepared to strike, upon finding that the Palunga clan still had tricks up their sleeves, he no longer rushed, casually dispatching the joint attack of Elder Blue and the Empress. Then he charged towards the 4 Holy Sons. Fusion required time, so when they saw Gula coming, they were in a dilemma. Once interrupted, all their previous efforts would be in vain. On the mountaintop, Jian Wushuang suddenly stood up and urgently called out to the elder in the house, "Quickly teleport me out." Though the elder was inside the house, he could still see the situation below through the crystal ball. Hearing Jian Wushuang's request to go down voluntarily, he hesitated. But there was no other way now, so he complied. Jian Wushuang had barely stood up when he appeared at the foot of the mountain. The gathered aura around him was already enough for him to unleash the super-eternal ancient transformation. Super-eternal ancient transformation! Jian Wushuang clenched his fist, and his figure suddenly burst forth, his divine power soaring directly to 800,000. Seeing Jian Wushuang suddenly appear, Gula was also startled. He glanced up at the mountain peak, understanding what had happened. Still some daredevils left. Gula sneered coldly. He could tell that Jian Wushuang only had a mere 800,000 divine power, which was nothing to worry about. But the barrier above the peak was a bit troublesome, and it could teleport. To prevent anyone from escaping with the Dragon Balls, Gula gathered a dark red beam in his hands and aimed it at the barrier on the mountain peak. Boom! The divine power of this strike definitely exceeded 1 million. Jian Wushuang was also startled. Seeing Gula attacking the barrier, he didn't rush to intervene. He was buying time for the 4 Holy Sons of the Palunga clan behind him. He was also waiting for Blue and the Empress to arrive. Then they could deal with Gula together. From a distance, Li Shang saw Jian Wushuang appear and even burst out with 800,000 divine power. He was also greatly shocked. He didn't know that Gula could transform. Now seeing the outbreak from the Palunga clan side again and Jian Wushuang rushing out, he felt a bit anxious for a moment. Wu Li on the mountaintop discovered that Jian Wushuang, after transforming, actually had 800,000 divine power, which greatly shocked him. He originally thought that this time they could surpass Jian Wushuang, but unexpectedly they were still outmatched. Jian Wushuang, the Empress, rushing over, saw Jian Wushuang and her eyes trembled. Jian Wushuang also looked at her, his gaze like water, with some resentment. He blamed the Empress for abandoning them, leaving without a word, leaving him and Jinchen behind. All the strong from the Yu Kingdom fell. This was more like a microcosm because all the universe masters who followed the Empress had also fallen. Now, among the human race, only 3.5 remained. The half was Li Shang, who had turned into a wild beast. When they came, they were all fine. But now they were all gone. Those who were still alive had unbelievably good luck. At the moment of seeing the Empress, words were on the tip of their tongues, but they couldn't say them. This feeling was very uncomfortable. Blue also arrived at this time. The 3 of them surrounded Gula. "You flies! Gula, blocked by them, was somewhat annoyed. With just one glance, he forced the three of them back and attacked the barrier again. This time, Blue stepped forward and began to burn his own divine power. Buzz! Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed as he transmitted, "Elder Blue, how much time do you need for that previous move?" Blue, with his burning divine body, had accumulated 1,000,000 divine power. If he were to execute that previous move again, he might catch Gula off guard. Gula's transformation also required some time. If he could slay Gula while he transformed, it would be a significant advantage. 3 breaths. Blue braced himself with both hands against Gula's punch and, as he retreated, glanced at Jian Wushuang. He understood Jian Wushuang's intention: to directly end Gula. Adding fuel to the fight would be courting death against Gula. Even if the 4 holy sons managed to produce a flower, it wouldn't be of much use. For 6th Tribulation Realm experts, no matter how strong, were merely 4 more plus. Perhaps they could withstand the current Gula, but they would definitely not be able to withstand Gula after his transformation. Clang! Jian Wushuang drew the Wanjia sword directly, calmly stating, "I'll handle these 3 breaths." He glanced back at the Empress, whose divine power was already becoming unstable. Whether she could be relied upon was a question. So he had to withstand these 3 breaths on his own. "Gula, your opponent now is me." Jian Wushuang held the sword horizontally, his wings flaring behind him. His speed was now on par with Gula's. This greatly shocked Gula. It was impossible to dodge that sword now, and he felt a bit flustered. He hadn't expected Jian Wushuang's speed to be this fast. Jian Wushuang only had 800,000 divine power, which Gula naturally didn't take seriously. But now his speed suddenly caught up, making Gula worried that Jian Wushuang's divine power might also skyrocket suddenly. However, after feeling the power of that sword, he breathed a sigh of relief. "I thought your speed matched your divine power." Gula held the Wanjia sword with one hand, and with a shake of his divine power, he directly knocked Jian Wushuang away. As Jian Wushuang was knocked back, his figure became unstable, and his speed slowed. At this moment, Gula flashed forward. With both hands behind him, he delivered a hammer blow, and the sharp spiral horn pierced directly through Jian Wushuang's chest. Puff! Blood trickled down his chest plate as Jian Wushuang's divine body ruptured. The gap was just too wide. Although he had unleashed the super ancient transformation, boosting his divine power to 800,000 and doubling his origin source power, he was still far from being an emperor. His life force churned madly, trying to heal his injuries, but the consumption outweighed the recovery. With a fierce shake of Gula's head, Jian Wushuang was thrown from the sky to the ground. Boom! Jian Wushuang's fall created a massive crater upon impact. The injury to his chest was severe, penetrating even the origin source universe. No matter how fast his life power recovered, instant healing was impossible. That was the difference. If they were of the same level, or if the opponent was just slightly stronger, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state. But facing Gula, a super powerhouse with 1,000,000 divine power, he had no means. 2 breaths. Jian Wushuang chuckled self-deprecatingly, unable to move his body. This time he really had no tricks left. He turned his head towards the direction of the Empress, mentally pleading, "Hold him off. Give Elder Blue a moment to breathe. We still have a chance to win." The Empress trembled, her divine body already cracking. The 2 breaths of respite were for gathering qi. Now, with some qi gathered, it became unstable again, and Jian Wushuang was on the brink of falling. "Little guy." The Empress was also moved. This time, the position of the Saintess was already hers. Actually, there was no need to muddy the waters anymore. Even if she didn't complete the mission and missed the position of the Holy Maiden, her participation in the Sacred Assembly this time was rewarding enough. From the half-step 6th Tribulation Realm to the pinnacle of the 6th Tribulation Realm, the many sacrifices she made were worth it. Why push it further? Moreover, there was no need to save someone who was on the brink of death like Jian Wushuang. It would be better to seize this opportunity to escape. Seeing the Empress hesitating from afar, Li Shang, who transformed into a palunga, was frantic. If Jian Wushuang died, he wouldn't be able to revert to the human race. With all the human powerhouse killed by Gula, he wouldn't be able to return to the 16 kingdoms. What would be the point of becoming a sixth tribulation realm in this infinite great world then? He couldn't just watch Jian Wushuang die. The same went for Wu Li on the mountaintop. Now Jian Wushuang was about to die, and his plan to enter Wanlu was also ruined. I've said it before, don't go, don't go. Wu Li shook his head, pulled out a 3-foot wooden sword, glanced at the house of the Great Elder, and his aura suddenly changed. Just as Wu Li was about to make a move, something happened on the Empress's side. Instead of heading towards Gula, she rushed towards Li Shang. Great King, save me, Li Shang shouted and directly threw out the Dragon Ball. This was their plan with the Empress, to use the Dragon Ball to distract Gula. Hearing Gula's shout, he paused and turned to look at the Empress's position. He had to stop. Damn it, you maggots have thoroughly angered me. Gula clenched his fists, no longer wanting to play around. The Empress had just rushed to Li Shang's side but was overwhelmed by Gula's aura. The colors in the sky began to distort. Gula's divine power also began to fluctuate continuously. Jian Wushuang at the bottom of the pit took the opportunity to roll over and leap towards a distance, loudly reminding, "Watch out for his transformation. Kid, you actually know who I am." Gula's expression was extremely embarrassed. This was a sign of his transformation. What he didn't expect was that a human kid actually knew he could transform. As far as he knew, there were no Frost Demon Clan members outside. Jian Wushuang, who had escaped to a distance, finally breathed a sigh of relief at this moment. A strand of thought power had been on Elder Blue all along, and the opponent's ultimate move had already formed. Now it was just waiting for an opportunity. Frost Demon Clan. Jian Wushuang took the opportunity to speak. Gula, I've killed a member of the Frost Demon Clan before, and he looks a lot like you. This sentence was somewhat provocative, but Gula didn't care about it. Although the strong members of the Frost Demon Clan were rare, they were not as united as the Palunga clan. Whether they lived or died had nothing to do with him. What he cared about was that someone knew his trump card. This made him very unhappy. Originally, he had wanted to show off in front of these people, but now it was all ruined. Since you know, then let you be the first one I kill after transforming. Gula's figure shook, and his divine power soared again. However, Jian Wushuang turned to Blue and said, "It's now!" Buzz. A pillar of light surrounded by black aura shot into the sky. Blue exerted all his divine power, and with the last bit of strength, he roared, "Demon-piercing light kills pole." Boom! This pillar of air was like a rainbow piercing the sun. It instantly rushed towards Gula. Gula, who was still preparing to transform, turned his head to look, but it was already in front of him. The blood vessels in his eyes burst, and he exclaimed, "What?" He had completely disregarded Elder Blue. His focus was entirely on Jian Wushuang, wanting to know how Jian Wushuang knew he would transform. It was precisely at that moment that Jian Wushuang deliberately drew his attention. And now it seemed to have succeeded. The power of Mo Guangguang's attack this time had exceeded 1,000,000 divine powers. A full 1.05 million. Even if it couldn't kill Gula, it could severely injure him. Injure him to the point where he couldn't transform anymore. Then they could win. The pillar of light covered Gula's body, rushing towards the distant mountains. Gula's physical body within the light wave was directly shattered, and his divine body was gradually disappearing. Completely passed through Gula, without a trace of excess. The light wave that passed through Gula fell into the distant mountains, erupting with a strong aura, then bursting apart. Boom! A powerful airflow followed. Jian Wushuang raised his hand to shield his eyes, but he could still feel 4 strong auras behind him. It was the 4 great holy suns. Good. They're all gathered together. Jian Wushuang's face lit up, turning to the 4 great holy suns and said, "Now, let's give Gula another blow." The damage just now was not enough to make Gula fall. They must take advantage of this opportunity to strike again, and not hesitate. The four great sacred sons had absorbed hundreds of strong members of the Palunga clan, and now each of them had reached about 1,000,000 divine powers, comparable to the Empress and Elder Blue. Buzz! The four of them rose into the air together, exerting their power, unleashing countless light waves, each with about 1,000,000 divine power, although not as powerful as Elder Blue's just now. But the quantity was astonishing. In just a breath's time, tens of thousands of strikes were made. Half of the entire Dragon God continent was destroyed in an instant. The origin source of the infinite great world was almost completely exhausted. Jian Wushuang finally realized. On the ancient Wood continent, they were simply not prepared for battles at the Seventh Tribulation Realm. The Hun Tian, with just one big move, directly destroyed the Yonghan Kingdom. That was just one example. The four great holy sons, with their frenzied attacks, nearly destroyed the entire infinite great world, which was quite normal. Anyway, it wasn't their own home, so Jian Wushuang didn't care, but rather hoped for more strength. The four great holy sons almost exerted all their power, not daring to be careless at all. It took almost the time it takes to burn an incense stick. Jian Wushuang's thought power had been paying attention all along, and at the same time, he approached Blue and took out some divine power fruits from the mustard seed, handing them to him. "Eat them quickly, and send me back to the mountaintop." Blue swallowed the divine power fruits, restoring some divine power, and directly sent Jian Wushuang back to the mountaintop with a handprint. Back on the mountaintop, Jian Wushuang finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. "Benefactor, let me restore you." Danbao walked over, actively wanting to restore some divine power to Jian Wushuang. But Jian Wushuang waved his hand and said, "I've already recovered." So fast. Wu Li came over at this time, but his aura had already returned to normal. "Any slower, and I would have died down there." Jian Wushuang shook his head and said, "Let's wait for the outcome. If Gula is still alive, we'll leave." With that said, he began to gather his energy again. He had returned to his normal state now. For escape, he could only use the super-eternal ancient transformation and then shuttle through with the three-quake universe. Even in this state, can he still survive? Wu Li pointed to the crystal ball, where the bottomless pits were visible. Jian Wushuang's face was pale, and he honestly said, "I can still sense Gula's aura. He's not that easy to kill. It depends on whether he can still transform." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a small black dot rising from the deep pit. Looking closely, it was indeed Gula. The people below the mountain were dumbfounded. Gula slowly rose from the deep pit to the sky, but his body was in tatters. He had lost all four limbs, and his chest had many holes. There were still a few holes on his face. For the first time, his divine power dropped from 1.08 million to 800,000. For Gula, this was already a serious injury. Any heavier and he would have almost no combat power left. "You ants actually managed to injure me. You all deserve to die." Gula's figure shook, and the rotten wounds began to heal, gradually transforming into perfect shapes. Snap! He landed on the ground and stepped towards Elder Blue. The four holy sons moved forward together to block Gula. "Since it's like this, let me show you how powerful I am after transforming." Gula sneered, fists clenched as his divine power erupted violently. A golden light burst forth instantly. The violent divine power began to rise. Jian Wushuang on the mountaintop already knew that this time, it was truly over. "Let's go." Jian Wushuang had also condensed his breath to perfection at this moment. He could unleash the super-ancient transformation at any time. Since Gula hadn't completely transformed yet, and his speed could still rival the opponents, they should hurry and escape with everyone. Wu Li, who had been thinking about leaving early, naturally felt joyful. "We've been waiting for this moment, but when we leave, let's bring Danbao with us. He can restore our divine power, which is a great help." Actually, Wu Li didn't need to say it. He would bring Danbao along anyway. But this sentence unexpectedly came from Wu Li's mouth, which puzzled him. Earlier, Wu Li didn't care about others' deaths at all, but now he actively wanted to bring Danbao along. He must have discovered something. He didn't rush to expose it, but he didn't immediately agree either. Instead, he looked at Danbao and said, "Danbao, do you want to come with us?" Danbao lowered his head, hesitating as he clutched his clothes. It was normal to hesitate. After all, this was the Holy Land. And leaving here would result in the destruction of the Holy Land and the demise of all his people. That was inevitable. He was just a child. How much could he understand? Jian Wushuang also understood his concerns. So he said, "If you're uncertain, why don't you ask the Grand Elder?" "Okay." Danbao nodded and ran into the house. Jian Wushuang looked at the crystal ball again. Below the mountain, Gula was reborn amidst the bursting golden light. As the golden light faded, a familiar figure appeared, just like the ancient temple Jian Wushuang had seen before. After transforming, Gula's figure was several times larger than before, and his divine power had surged significantly. 1,000,000. Jian Wushuang found it difficult to comprehend. With a furrowed brow, he pondered how to escape next. He knew there was a teleportation array on the mountain, but the distance it could teleport was limited. He still needed to use the three-quake universe. Wu Li stated, 1.3 million. The tree person inside him informed Wu Li of Gula's divine power. 1.3 million divine power. Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised to hear this. That was normal. Before transforming, he had 1.08 million. After transforming, possessing 1.3 million, it wasn't as powerful as he had imagined. This level of divine power was considered high-tier among those at the 7th Tribulation Realm. He had witnessed Dylan's explosion before. His divine power reached 1.8 million. The upper limit of the 7th Tribulation Realm was too high. 1 million was just the beginning, just like Hun Tian was indeed in the 7th Tribulation Realm. However, his divine power was terrifyingly immense, potentially reaching a minimum of 3 million. He was the strongest 7th Tribulation Realm existence in the entire ancient Wood continent. Even in the Universe Dao arena, few dared to challenge him. Currently, his avatars were unable to sense anything, overwhelmed by the frequent battles in the infinite great world. He had no time to spare for external matters. Dealing with the greatest threat, Gula, seemed impossible, leaving him little concern for anything else. The people below the mountain were doomed. Jian Wushuang couldn't bear to look at them anymore. The Empress couldn't escape even if she tried. He had no intention of dealing with her, maybe just bringing along 2 people. Even if he could take 3, the Empress wouldn't be considered. She had completely lost her mind, consumed by a desire for strength at any cost. She would betray them eventually. What was the point? Benefactor, Elder Blue requests your presence. Danbao emerged from Elder Blue's room, calling out to Jian Wushuang and Wu Li. Though time was short, it was better to meet if Elder Blue wished. There might be some last wishes or legacies to be left behind. Jian Wushuang wasn't interested in treasures, but opportunities couldn't be ignored. Perhaps Elder Blue could provide them with some chances. Wu Li, on the other hand, wanted everything and dragged Jian Wushuang into the room. Upon entering, they felt a sense of impending death in the air, signaling Elder Blue's deteriorating health. Even if Gula didn't act, Elder Blue wouldn't survive much longer. It was only then that Jian Wushuang noticed Danbao's aura had unexpectedly grown stronger, reaching the level of an ordinary Tribulation Realm cultivator. This was quite surprising. It seemed Elder Blue had provided Danbao with some treasure to enhance his strength. Seeing them enter, Elder Blue mustered some strength and spoke. Humans, Gula's power is indeed as formidable as you've described. Elder Blue, if you have something to say, please hurry. We don't have much time, Wu Li interjected anxiously. The Grand Elder paused for a moment, then spoke directly. There are some things I can't say directly. Take a look at this jade slip. If you feel there's hope for yourselves, there's no need to rush to leave. A jade slip. Jian Wushuang found a small jade slip and didn't understand what the Grand Elder meant. After channeling his psychic energy into the jade slip, Jian Wushuang was stunned. The Dragon Balls can be used like this? He looked up at the Grand Elder, somewhat incredulous. At this moment, Wu Li was also curious. He quickly dodged the jade slip and was stunned when he saw its contents. The content was straightforward. Gather 9 Dragon Balls to allow the Grand Elder to unleash a power that can reverse the rules. This power reverses the supreme rules. Not to mention Wu Li, Jian Wushuang had never heard of it either. For a moment they were uncertain. Reversing the rules. Unlocking potential. Simple words, yet containing so much. Wu Li spoke up. How far can this potential be unlocked? His focus was always on his own greatest benefit. But he didn't consider the authenticity of this. Even if the potential was unlocked, could it still double their combat power? Jian Wushuang didn't think so. If it were that powerful, why hadn't they done it earlier? The Grand Elder's eyelids trembled, and he said unsteadily, the unlocked potential is the origin source within oneself. The stronger the potential of the origin source, the stronger the unleashed combat power. The origin source of my Palunga clan is too weak, so I've always... Just now, he had unlocked the potential for Danbao with 1 Dragon Ball. That was the only thing he could do. He hoped the last member of the clan would become stronger and have the ability to protect themselves. At the same time, they should also have their own value. This way, they wouldn't be abandoned. Danbao's eyes were filled with tears as he said, Grand Elder, even with just 1 Dragon Ball, you'll shorten your lifespan considerably. If all 9 Dragon Balls are used together, you'll perish. Silly child. My time is almost up. Even if Gula doesn't kill me, I won't last much longer. The Grand Elder lowered his head and looked at Danbao with indulgence. It was only now that Wu Li realized Danbao's aura had become much stronger than before. Although his divine power had not increased much, his origin source had become much stronger. Danbao was never a combatant type to begin with, so increasing divine power was useless. With a stronger origin source, he would definitely be able to help others recover divine power faster. Wushuang, why don't I go and try first? Wu Li looked at Jian Wushuang, apparently wanting to see his opinion. Jian Wushuang didn't stop him and casually said, if you feel you still have potential, go ahead and try. He was already a perfect emperor now. If he unleashed more potential, he was afraid he might overexert himself. So he didn't think much of it and didn't have any expectations. Wu Li happily walked over. His divine power was at its peak 700,000. It could be considered half a step into the 5th Tribulation Realm. From being at the half-step 4th Tribulation Realm before, now there was a significant advancement. Would igniting his potential again allow Wu Li to undergo another tribulation right where he stood? Jian Wushuang waited to see Wu Li's embarrassment. The elder held up a Dragon Ball with one hand and placed the other on Wu Li's forehead. Buzz! A surge of power erupted. Then, accompanied by a dragon roar, a golden light burst from Wu Li's body. The powerful force of rules descended from the sky, startling Jian Wushuang. Reversing the rules, he muttered unbelievingly. Could it be true that he's going to undergo the tribulation right here? The tribulation in the void condensed. But because of the power within the Dragon Ball, it began to dissipate. Wu Li was overjoyed. He hadn't expected this surprise to come so suddenly. He had undergone the tribulation for nothing. There were no signs at all. The elder released his hand, his complexion once again becoming grim. Apparently, he didn't have much life left. He was now in a dying state. Human, with my current life, I can only help you elevate with 1 Dragon Ball at most. The elder also felt he might have exaggerated his earlier words. Using 9 Dragon Balls together to boost potential would cost too much lifespan. He hadn't even tried it. But in his opinion, the potential unleashed by 1 Dragon Ball was almost enough. Wu Li, at the half-step 5th Tribulation Realm, suddenly transformed into the half-step 6th Tribulation Realm. This was extremely absurd. Initially, Wu Li's dream was the 5th Tribulation Realm. Now, even before entering the Wanyan Divine Wood, he reached the half-step 6th Tribulation Realm. Unparalleled brother, it's really damn useful. I feel like I can take on Gula now. After the surge of his origin, the tree people within him helped him convert all the power of the origin source of all things into divine power. This meant his divine power had surged, and he had reached the half-step 6th Tribulation Realm. He could now crazily consume divine power treasures to enhance his own divine power. Thinking of this, Wu Li shamelessly reached out to the elder for treasures. They cleaned up everything, leaving nothing behind. "All right, that's enough. Tidy up. We're getting ready to leave." He remained unmoved. He knew his own situation best. As Wu Li elevated his divine power, he nodded vigorously, but deep down, there was still some reluctance. There were still 4 Dragon Balls here, and just one use had already elevated him so much. So, if he were to use 4 Dragon Balls for elevation, wouldn't he be able to reach the 6th Tribulation Realm? But the thought of Elder Blue having only one breath left dampened his spirits. It seemed he wouldn't have this opportunity again. He could only sigh inwardly. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to unleash the super-eternal ancient transformation, a voice echoed in his mind. "You went to the little Wanlu for the purpose of breaking through the Tribulation Realm, didn't you? Now this opportunity is right in front of you. Why not seize it?" This voice came from his original universe. And in his original universe, there was only one person. Whis! Jian Wushuang sucked in a cold breath. He thought the other party wouldn't care about him, but he didn't expect to be reminded at this moment. In the Origin Source universe, above Tianqing Mountain, was lounged on a huge recliner, basking in the sun, while directing the humanoid life forms he had created to arrange a huge mansion. Despite spending so much time arranging it, it still hadn't reached his satisfaction. Hearing Jian Wushuang dare to question him, he said calmly, "If you don't believe me, you can leave at any time." "I believe you." Jian Wushuang nodded frantically. Since Whis had spoken, how could he not believe it? After all, the other party was a god. However, since potential was being tapped, it should be maximized. The 9 Dragon Balls must be together. There were still 4 outside, so he could figure out a way to get them. If he could really reach the Tribulation Realm, he wouldn't need Elder Blue's help. He could transcend 5 Tribulation Realms at once. Would he still fear Gula then? A mere 1.3 million divine power. Once he broke through to the Tribulation Realm, he wouldn't need to use divine power. He could beat Gula with swordsmanship alone. Origin Source divine power. The most powerful was still the Origin Source. "What's wrong?" Wu Li asked as he saw Jian Wushuang standing still, anxious that something might happen again. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and said, "We're not leaving. Have you thought it through?" Elder Blue was also delighted. He could see that Jian Wushuang's potential was boundless. Although only 1 Dragon Ball had been used, it could still make Jian Wushuang's strength multiply. "Elder Blue, I've thought it through, but I want to use 9 Dragon Balls to tap into my potential." 9 balls! Not only was Elder Blue stunned, but Wu Li also exclaimed, "Brother Wushuang, don't joke around. Where can you find the conditions for that now?" Even if they went out and snatched the remaining 4 Dragon Balls, the Grand Elder's remaining lifespan wouldn't be enough for him to squander. "I'm confident." Despite their disbelief, Jian Wushuang was extremely confident. It's just the power of life. He had plenty of it. At this point, he didn't care whether he exposed it or not. As long as he could reach the Tribulation Realm, everything was worth it. Moreover, he had created the super-eternal ancient transformation. Once he reached the Tribulation Realm, he would be able to quickly reach the 5th Tribulation Realm. Using the super-eternal ancient transformation, his combat power would be at least comparable to the 7th Tribulation Realm. There was another point. That is, his Origin Source universe could be accommodated within his divine body. In this way, it was like carrying a mobile Dao arena. His combat power would also skyrocket. Killing Gula was not a problem, and even if he went out, he was confident in preserving his life. Once he reached the Universe Master, his 3-Quake universe would dominate the ancient moon spacetime. Except for the Universe Masters of the 8th Tribulation Realm, no one could catch up with him. He still had this confidence. As long as he was given time, after devouring Dong Jun's bones, his basic divine power could quickly exceed 1 million. At that time, when he used the full-powered super-eternal ancient transformation, he didn't dare to imagine how powerful he would become. At this moment, Wu Li stepped forward to ruin his parade. "Brother, This matter is not something you can control just because you want to. There are some things you simply can't control. What about this? Jian Wushuang directly plunged deep into his palm, using his mental power to mobilize the power of life within his body, which instantly gathered in his palm. This scene directly stunned everyone. Wu Li's eyes lit up, and the tray ant inside him almost came out. The power of life, Dan Bao also exclaimed. At the same time, he thought of the treasure inside his body. He could transform divine power and life with the power of all things because of a treasure. But Jian Wushuang's power of life was the purest innate life. The Grand Elder's murky eyes, when seeing the power of life, also revealed a faint glimmer. This glimmer continued to enlarge. Jian Wushuang approached Elder Blue and directly infused the power of life into his body. Elder Blue of the Palunga clan, upon receiving that surge of life force, began to slowly transform from his aged and weary state. Previously, he couldn't even open his eyelids. Now he could actually stand up. It was nothing short of a miracle of life. Wushuang, you must be out of your mind. Wu Li reacted at this moment, pointing towards the sky. The meaning was clear. Everything they were doing here could be clearly seen by the outside experts. This round's sacred gathering. It was doomed. Countless scattered tribulation experts would rush over soon. Even those at the 8th tribulation realm would meet their fate. But Jian Wushuang didn't care, saying, "We'll meet the enemy head-on and face whatever comes." Courageous. Elder Blue, standing up, looked towards Jian Wushuang and said, "With the life power you've given me, it's enough to unleash your potential with the 9 Dragon Balls. Now I see, you're actually at the level of Emperor, truly remarkable." "It's nothing." Jian Wushuang became even more audacious, saying casually, "Only when I reach the tribulation realm can we reverse this crisis. By then, there's no need to flee. I'll also give you, Elder Blue, the power of life to ensure the eternal prosperity of the Palunga clan. I believe in your potential too." Elder Blue of the Palunga clan now had the same confidence as Jian Wushuang. Wu Li stood by, unsure of what to do. Running away depended on strength. Without Jian Wushuang, how could he escape? "Wu Li." Jian Wushuang's expression turned serious as he looked at him and said, "And the senior inside you, from now on, every word I say is sworn by the highest rules. As long as you all wholeheartedly help me, I will surely repay your kindness in the future." This time, he gave them a glimpse of his bottom line. As long as they helped him resolve this matter, everything would be beneficial in the future. No matter what the Trent's plan was, or what his identity was, he would spare no effort, helping the other party achieve their goal. They could pick treasures first. As long as they helped him this time. Wu Li's eyes flickered, swallowing hard, torn in his heart, while also waiting for the tray ant to tell him what to do. He couldn't make the decision on his own. Strength was one aspect, but experience was another. "Agree to him." Wu Li's eyes flickered, nodding in agreement. A smile instantly spread across his face as he approached Jian Wushuang, patting his chest. "We're on the same side. Even without your words, I would still stand by you." Though somewhat insincere, the sentiment was comforting. In truth, Wu Li deferred to the tray ant because of his own lack of strength. Even at the half-step 6th tribulation realm, his divine power could only burst to around 800,000, a meager amount. This divine power was practically useless outside. For the upcoming mission to seize the Dragon Balls, he would need the support of the tray ant. "Thanks." Jian Wushuang expressed genuine gratitude this time. Wu Li had intended to pat him on the shoulder, but thought better of it. His hand hovered awkwardly before patting the air. "It's nothing. How long do you need me to hold out?" Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, already sending a message to Li Shang. Seizing the Dragon Balls would happen swiftly, but breaking through required preparation. The Grand Elder understood the risks involved. He paused before speaking. "I've already communicated with Elder Blue. As long as you can hold out for the time it takes an incense stick to burn, Blue will fuse with the 4 great holy suns, becoming the strongest warrior in our clan. An incense stick's worth of time." Wu Li clenched his teeth but ultimately agreed. Everything was in place. Let's begin then. Jian Wushuang immediately activated the super-eternal ancient transformation, placing a hand on Wu Li's shoulder. He then turned to the Grand Elder. Please teleport me out. I'm going too. Danbao spoke up at this moment. Jian Wushuang had initially wanted to object, but considering Danbao's ability to quickly restore their divine power, he saw her as an asset. He wouldn't be able to help others regain their divine power later, especially when facing Gula. Seizing the Dragon Balls would undoubtedly provoke Gula's wrath. Speed was crucial. Time was running out for him. Outside forces would undoubtedly take notice of him soon. In fact, it was much like what Wu Li had mentioned. The entire ancient Holy Land was in chaos now. Dozens of scattered experts at the 7th Tribulation Realm had already entered negotiations with the ancient Wood sect. It was termed negotiations, but in reality, it was coercion. They demanded that the ancient Wood sect transport them to the infinite great world. Things had escalated to this point. Even with the personal arrival of the Divine Wood King, it was futile. However, if these individuals knew that the current Divine Wood King could still unleash peak strength, they might not have dared to cause such a commotion. Regardless of anything, the sacred assembly has not concluded yet. No one is allowed to enter. That's the rule set by the Divine Wood King, and no one can break it. Humph! A 7th Tribulation Realm powerhouse from within a hidden realm stepped forward, loudly declaring, "You say we can't enter, so we can't? Who knows how many of your own people you've sent in?" Other 7th Tribulation Realm powerhouses also joined in the clamor. The head of the ancient Wood sect was in an unfortunate situation. The major players were nowhere to be seen, leaving him a minor figure to handle everything outside. Although he held the position of sect head, he only managed trivial matters. The real important affairs were managed by those supreme elders. And there was also the Divine Wood King. Now, these people had disappeared without a trace, leaving him to fend off all by himself. These old folks, the madness of the scattered experts, the silence of the universe master. Tongha Sword Immortal and Sure Kingdom sat together, but now, apart from Li Xing, all the Sure Kingdom experts had gone to find the head of the ancient Wood sect. Even the patriarch of the Yu Kingdom took the lead. He was the son-in-law of the Yu Kingdom, after all. Outwardly, he stood for justice. "Aren't you going to join the fun, elderly?" Tongha Sword Immortal looked at Li Xing, surprised that he hadn't gone. Though Li Xing's vitality was still vigorous, it was wise to plan ahead. Li Xing grasped the pendant in his hand, smiling. "I prefer being passive. Being too proactive isn't good." Of course, it also depended on who he was being proactive with. They were well aware of Jian Wushuang's potential. Things weren't as simple as they appeared. There would definitely be 8th Tribulation Realm figures involved. This wasn't the time to be impatient. In the sacred grounds of the ancient Wood sect, for out of the 10 7th Tribulation Realm experts under Babiti's command had arrived. "It's quite something," remarked one of the 4, all of whom recognized Jian Wushuang. Now, it all depended on Emperor Babiti's intentions. Within the chaotic void streams, the cosmic boat drifted aimlessly. Inside the cabin, Babiti had long received the news. He had already surrounded Jian Wushuang's clone with his men. However, Jian Wushuang's clone was currently devoid of any consciousness, as if completely severed. "Lord Babiti, why don't we just head straight to the ancient Wood sect and capture his true body?" suggested Dylan, his gaze ice-cold as he stared at Jian Wushuang. The others, due to Babiti's secret technique, no longer thirsted as much for the power of life. Moreover, they had learned that Jian Wushuang's life force had not fluctuated much. Babiti's claw scratched his chin, clearly pondering something. Compared to Jian Wushuang, his plans were more crucial. The reason he valued Jian Wushuang was because of Miashang. Only life could defeat Miashang. If he wanted to use Jian Wushuang to defeat Miashang, he had to first control Jian Wushuang. Unfortunately, he was somewhat losing control now. He had considered the holy land of the ancient Wood sect. There was also that Wanlu tree, containing something even he couldn't fathom. But inside was a key artifact related to resurrection secrets. Resurrection. That was Babiti's alias for the secret technique. It was also his grandest plan. Babiti had experienced much in the starry sky, understanding that this world had gods. Only those gods could stand above all. The tribulation realm was but a joke. Even the 9th tribulation could fall. Babiti aimed to use the 9 tribulations of the 9 great spacetimes to achieve his path to godhood. This plan was even crazier than Mieshang's. But now he had the capital for it. Qi Zhouxiao, it's time for you to move. Babiti raised his eyelids, revealing his swirling eyes, gleaming with cold light. The ancient wood sect. Soon it became the core of the entire ancient moon spacetime. And all of this was because of Jian Wushuang's exposed life force. In the infinite great world, Jian Wushuang and his group had already begun their actions. At the same time, above the infinite great world, in the core of the formation array, dozens of super experts were jointly destroying the core of the formation array. The formation array was established by the ancient wood sect. Now they were dismantling it themselves. It just took a bit of time. To enter the infinite great world, it would still take at least a day. As long as they could hold off those 7th tribulation realm existences outside, they would be able to gain control of Jian Wushuang first. Who set up this formation array back then? Asked an elder wearing a green high hat. The crowd paused for a moment, then explained, it was set up by the 7th elder, Old 7. The elder in the high hat fell silent for a moment, then continued to destroy the core of the formation array. The elderly man with the high crown was none other than the founder of the ancient wood continent. In the beginning, the ancient wood continent was still a wilderness, but he led the 8-star sect and the ancient wood faction to open up a vast territory. He was also the most powerful figure in the ancient wood continent. Humph. This time I will definitely capture you. The divine wood king treaded the void, gazing greedily at the core area of the wilderness, where the 10,000 willows stood. The power of primordial life emerged once again. In the eyes of the divine wood king, it was definitely related to the 10,000 willows. Capturing Jian Wushuang was equivalent to unlocking the 10,000 willows. Countless powerful beings observed and speculated. But Jian Wushuang was completely unaware, although he was mentally prepared. But this time, the opponent he was about to face was unprecedentedly powerful. On the peak of Dragon God Mountain, Jian Wushuang stood side by side with Wu Li. This time, I must win. He clenched his fists. Coming to the ancient moon spacetime, he aimed to become a tribulation realm expert and master the universe. He had to win. Wu Li took a deep breath, but the divine power on his body began to change. That terrifying divine power did not belong to him, but was controlled by the Treant within his divine body. Although I shouldn't ask, I still want to say, even if you go through 5 tribulations at once, but there is no universe here, you can't just create one again, can you? For ordinary people, this was indeed a big problem. The original universes gestating in spacetime all had their quantities. But now, there were no original universes left. They could only refine the universe themselves. This would take a very long time. There was no time for that now. Jian Wushuang had already exposed a lot this time, so he might as well not conceal anything anymore. He turned to Wu Li and explained, I have a way. In a short time, I can condense my own primordial universe and rapidly increase my divine power. As long as I successfully break through, I can reach the tribulation realm in half a day. He was brimming with confidence. Wu Li didn't say anything more. He directly unleashed the divine power infused into him by the Treant, causing his aura to surge. Move! With a splash, the two of them disappeared in an instant. When they reappeared, Wu Li was standing in front of Gula, wielding a sword in one hand. Transformed, Gula's divine power soared to 1.3 million. The Empress lay severely injured on the ground, her life hanging by a thread. Elder Blue and the 4 holy sons, joining forces, couldn't withstand a single punch from Gula. Despair crept over them. But unexpectedly, someone dared to descend from the peak at this moment. Hurry! Get out of here! Elder Blue's urgency was palpable. This wasn't part of the Elder's original plan at all. Originally, The Elder's plan was for them to hold out. If victory seemed possible, that would naturally be the best outcome. If victory was impossible, then they would have to rely on Jian Wushuang to escape with Danbao. But now it seemed they had already lost. Wu Li's face was ashen, but a faint smile appeared on his lips as he spoke. The outcome is still uncertain. We still have hope. You won't last even the time it takes to burn an incense stick. Elder Blue shook his head. The Elder had just communicated to him, urging them to proceed with the final fusion. But Elder Blue needed too much time. Unless Gula just stood there waiting for him, it would be impossible to successfully fuse. He couldn't rely on Wu Li alone. After Wu Li's breakthrough, his divine power exceeded 800,000, reaching the strength of the sixth tribulation realm. But compared to Gula, it was like a drop in the ocean, a mantis trying to stop a chariot, overestimating its own strength. Let me show you my true strength. Wu Li's voice dropped as his divine power surged once more. His face contorted in discomfort. This was the strain on his divine body. The accumulation of that violent divine power was too much. It wasn't even his own divine power, and now, using it, the backlash against him was immense. But the Treant had told him, as long as there was a breath left, whether it was Danbao or Jian Wushuang, they could restore him to his peak. Otherwise, he wouldn't be fighting so desperately. Even Gula was taken aback by the person before him. Initially unconcerned, he began to feel unsettled as he sensed Wu Li's divine power skyrocketing to 1,000,000 in an instant. You guys are really troublesome. Gula frowned and immediately charged towards Wu Li. At that moment, Jian Wushuang, hidden in the void, took action. He swiftly arrived by Li Shang's side. Sorry about this. Jian Wushuang smirked evilly. Then with a single wave of his hand, he directly took away the 4 dragon balls beside Li Shang. Li Shang gritted his teeth but ultimately didn't make a move, just watched as Jian Wushuang took the dragon balls and left. Gula, who had just charged halfway, sensed a strong fluctuation of energy behind him and knew something was wrong. Seeing the disappearance of the dragon balls beside Li Shang, he flew into a complete rage. Jian Wushuang, hidden in the void, was shaken out by that surge of energy. You insignificant ant. I'll kill you first. Gula's divine power continued to surge as he leaped forward towards Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang immediately shouted towards the mountaintop, It's now! Swish! Boom! Gula's fist struck a remnant shadow, while Jian Wushuang had already left. Before he could react, Wu Li rushed over. 3-foot wooden sword, capable of cutting through the heavens. The wooden sword swept from the depths of the void, piercing through space, causing the entire infinite great world to tremble. At this moment, Wu Li's divine power soared to 1.3 million. Gula was stunned, quickly trying to deflect with his hands. But as soon as his hands touched the blade, his divine power began to decline continuously. The void shattered, space was pierced. The power of this sword was not something Gula could intercept. Wu Li struck again, several swords slashing out, and the divine power he consumed was continuously restored by the Treant. He was the only opponent that made Gula feel pressured, something that had never happened before. Far away, Elder Blue and the others had already begun to merge. Feeling Wu Li's aura, they were also deeply shocked. This time, they might really win, and they might not even need Jian Wushuang to win. The Grand Elder also paid attention to this battle. Equally incredulous, he couldn't see through Jian Wushuang, nor could he see through Wu Li. In his view, Wu Li's potential was not that strong. Perhaps in this lifetime he wouldn't surpass the 5th tribulation realm. But under the current outbreak, Wu Li's future had already begun to change. The 5th tribulation's realm had turned from a peak to a starting point for Wu Li. This was the current change in Wu Li. Swish! The space trembled as Jian Wushuang, carrying the 4 dragon balls, arrived in front of the Grand Elder. Let's begin. He placed the dragon balls down, merging them with the 5 dragon balls beside the Grand Elder. 9 dragon balls were assembled. Before starting, the Grand Elder took a final look at the situation outside and reminded, Don't feel pressured. This time Wu Li and Blue might be able to handle Gula. That's for the best. Jian Wushuang nodded. He hoped Wu Li and Blue would succeed. Then he wouldn't have much to worry about. Buzz. The Grand Elder didn't say anything more, directly channeling his own thought power into the Dragon Balls, bursting out with a powerful aura that shattered the house and flew into the sky. The rules of heaven and earth were instantly cut off. The outside world could no longer see what was happening here. Jian Wushuang found himself involuntarily floating up. His divine power and origin source began to surge continuously. Without the constraints of supreme rules, he had no limits to his realm. He could cultivate madly. Tribulation. Jian Wushuang looked up at the sky and then said solemnly, "As long as I intercept the law rules immediately, I must bear this tribulation." Originally, according to Elder Blue's plan, he didn't need to deal with the first difficulty of the tribulation realm. But now he felt it unnecessary. The clouds gathering in the sky shattered and condensed, brewing an extremely dangerous tribulation. The gods like the divine Wood King, who were destroying the core of the infinite great world, were stunned. Suddenly, they found they couldn't break the formation. The entire infinite great world was isolated from the outside world. "It's that old guy." Divine Wood's expression was difficult. He thought of Elder Kinyu of the Palunga clan. The infinite great world was the most special among the worlds suppressed by the ancient Wood sect. The reason for choosing the infinite great world for the sacred assembly was actually another conspiracy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let Gula cause chaos. They would have dealt with Gula long ago. Although the scattered tribulation powerhouses couldn't come in, it didn't matter if they destroyed the formation for so many universe masters. The ancient Wood sect had hidden motives, so they didn't go to rescue. Instead, they added fuel to the fire. Their goal was not the cultivators but Gula. If someone could really defeat Gula, that would be fine. The real goal was the 9 Dragon Balls to open a treasure land. That treasure land was related to Wanlu. It was all a trap from the beginning, interconnected. Anyone could take the position of the Holy Maiden, but the opportunity Wanlu had to open was only once. As for why they didn't gather the Dragon Balls themselves, it was related to the oath within the Dragon Balls. The Dragon God made a vow in the beginning. Only the elder of the Palunga clan could unlock it. Gula was just a decoy. What they wanted was for the Palunga clan's elder to personally unlock the 9 Dragon Balls. Regardless of the purpose, it would still lead to some treasure trove. Only the appearance of Jian Wushuang disrupted the ancient Wood sect's plans. Now, it could be considered a double blessing. In the eyes of the divine Wood King, both benefits were related to Wanlu. Now, he was sure to obtain it. Isolated from the supreme law rules, that meant the Dragon Balls were working. Unfortunately, they had not yet entered the infinite great world. This unsettled the divine Wood King somewhat. He felt a threat slowly approaching. This threat, he thought, was in the infinite great world. But that was not the case. This threat came from Babidi. It arrived at just the right time, perfectly delaying Jian Wushuang. The deviation of fate had arrived. Dragon God Mountain. Jian Wushuang hovered in the air, facing the first challenge. This was the difficulty of breaking through the tribulation realm. It was also a tribulation. Do you really not need to intervene? The elder below hesitated, feeling it was not the time to show heroism. He felt Jian Wushuang didn't need to confront it head-on at all. Facing this challenge, Jian Wushuang's expression remained calm, feeling no threat, and said calmly, "I must take on this challenge, or else I won't be able to grasp time." Time! The elder was stunned. Although he didn't understand, he knew it was related to Jian Wushuang's breakthrough in strength. And that was enough. Jian Wushuang looked up at the gathering clouds in the sky. His eyes like ripples, gazing past, the clouds dispersed. In their place descended a grand light, directly enveloping him. The low rules of time also descended rapidly. This challenge for Jian Wushuang was as simple as drinking water. The clouds in the sky disappeared. The isolated supreme law rules descended once again. The outside world could once again see the situation below. The divine Wood King and others happened to see Jian Wushuang in the sky. This kid, attempting to break through the tribulation realm? He must be out of his mind. Doesn't he fear Gula's interference by now? Divine Wood King first glanced at Elder Blue of the Palunga clan, then turned his gaze to Gula, speaking, Gula has been intercepted. Investigate whether this Wu Li is related to Hungmu. The surprises kept piling up. The Everwood, seemingly entangled in this conflict. The treasures obtained from the Everwood back then had rekindled his ambitions, and he gained the confidence to confront the Nine-Star sect and the Ancient Moon sect anew. A real man wouldn't bow down to anyone. In the Holy Land of Ancient Wood, those 7th Tribulation Realm powerhouses still causing trouble were already planning a strong assault. They were now just waiting for a powerhouse of the 8th Tribulation Realm to lead them. The 8th Tribulation Realm ancestor of the Sure Kingdom would soon descend. Meanwhile, scattered Tribulation powerhouses from various major forces were also rushing over. The Ancient Wood sect wouldn't be able to deceive them anymore when they arrived. While waiting, they also kept a close eye on Jian Wushuang. After a brief pause, seeing Jian Wushuang attempting to break through the Tribulation Realm again, they were all stunned. Apparently, these people couldn't understand Jian Wushuang's actions? Does this kid think that becoming a Tribulation Realm expert can defeat Gula? These geniuses always think they can match everything. Just wait, he'll soon despair. These 7th Tribulation Realm big shots each had divine powers exceeding 1 million. They didn't even bother to consider Jian Wushuang. Although they had previously seen Jian Wushuang explosively release 800,000 divine power in an instant, they believed that power didn't belong to Jian Wushuang. Otherwise, why would he need to gather energy in advance with a time limit? Even if he broke through to the Tribulation Realm, so what? They didn't believe Jian Wushuang could boost his divine power to 1 million in such a short time. Not to mention how many treasures he would need. Just talking about this time, it was already too late. Behind these people, Lian Xing kept an eye on Jian Wushuang breaking through the Tribulation Realm, whispering, Kid, you have too many secrets on you. I hope you can survive this crisis. Unlike other scattered powerhouses, although Lian Xing had known Jian Wushuang for a short time, he understood Jian Wushuang's strength the most. Brilliant time and time again. Jian Wushuang was like the brightest star in the night sky. Perhaps he would become a shooting star. Maybe he would become the eternal sun and moon. Regardless, he still believed in Jian Wushuang. He didn't take action against Jian Wushuang just because of the power of life. If he needed this life force, he only needed to say a word, and someone would provide it. If Jian Wushuang could survive this crisis, the same goes for him. If he needed it, Jian Wushuang would also provide it. So, there was no need to wade into this muddy water. Just watch. Maybe Jian Wushuang would once again amaze everyone. Jian Wushuang, who was breaking through the Tribulation Realm, wasn't thinking about these things. He was fully immersed in the rules of time, becoming one with time. At the same time, he left the imprint of the supreme law rules on his body. The great Tao of time had already taken shape. He had already stepped into it. In the Moro spacetime or the spacetime of the original universe. He was already in the Tribulation Realm. It's just that he was in the Ancient Moon spacetime now. They didn't realize anything unusual about the Emperor. It seemed like the only change was a slight increase in the limits of their origin source and divine power. The Tribulation Realm was straightforward. The most crucial aspect remained the condensation of the universe. One thought universe. Buzz. This time, the universe directly enveloped the entire infinite great world. The magnitude of this movement silenced even the scattered Tribulation experts outside. He's become the universe master directly? It's impossible. Condensing the universe isn't that easy. Even if he transcended 3 tribulations at once, condensing the universe without experiencing any tribulations, this is different from the rules of Ancient Moon spacetime. The head of the Ancient Wood sect also watched Jian Wushuang's breakthrough. At this moment, he loudly reminded everyone. Perhaps Jian Wushuang isn't a practitioner of Ancient Moon spacetime at all. This statement awakened everyone. You must have investigated his background. But I've checked the reversal of time. Jian Wushuang is a reincarnated individual, yet he has never mentioned memories of his past life. Moreover, in all of Ancient Moon spacetime, there probably isn't another emperor who has reached his level. The Emperor's divine power reached hundreds of thousands, whether from the river of history or the contemporary ancient moon sect. None could rival Jian Wushuang. After the head of the ancient Wood sect spoke, it indeed seemed to be the case. They speculated that Jian Wushuang might come from one of the other 8 major spacetimes. Among the 9 major spacetimes, ancient moon spacetime was the weakest. The emperors here couldn't compare. In other spacetimes, there might be figures like Jian Wushuang, an emperor who could rival the 5th tribulation realm. Some even suspected Jian Wushuang came from the starry sky. The more they guessed, the more elaborate the theories became. They all felt Jian Wushuang's identity was not simple. If they didn't act now, perhaps some important figure would come and take Jian Wushuang away. Treating reincarnation as an ordeal was truly a challenge to the imagination of these experts. The more they speculated, the more extravagant their ideas became. They never imagined that such a reversal of Luo Rule's emperor like Jian Wushuang could appear downstream. Within the boundless world, the universe of one thought expanded completely, continued to expand, until it enveloped the entire infinite great world within it. Its diameter was much larger than the origin source universe of a 6th tribulation universe master. So the outsiders, the strong ones, were so shocked. This was also why he would do so after using the super-eternal ancient transformation. Otherwise, his universe would have been at the complete level, the same size as a 5th tribulation universe master. But after using the super-eternal ancient transformation, it was different. The super-eternal ancient transformation was initially meant to amplify the origin source. It's just that his divine power was elevated to a higher limit because of the blood-colored aura. During the Emperor period, his divine power surpassed the origin source's strength. So he always calculated his own strength based on divine power. But it was different when he became the universe master. This time, his origin source would completely surpass divine power. And with the super-eternal ancient transformation, the amplification of the origin source could reach 100-fold. Amplifying divine power was only 50-fold. The first tribulation. His aura shook, and at this moment, his origin source was already at the peak of the 5th tribulation realm. This was even before crossing the tribulation. The highest Luo Rule's tribulation fell directly into the universe. But it was like a drop of water falling into the cosmic sea. Insignificant. The strong ones who were watching him were quite normal at this time. They were not surprised this time. They felt that Jian Wushuang would have no problem even crossing the 5 tribulations. This was only the first tribulation. But when they waited for the first tribulation to pass, the increase in Jian Wushuang's origin source stunned everyone. Jian Wushuang himself couldn't help trembling. That violent power kept surging and rising. Ah! He roared with his head raised high, and the one-thought universe once again became more tangible. The origin source continued to expand. Unfortunately, this space was limited. Otherwise, his origin source universe could have expanded further. After the baptism of the supreme Luo Rules, the number of black holes in the origin source universe surged again. Every tribulation strengthened the origin source. The tribulation for his divine body was as easy as scratching an itch, causing no harm but rather boosting his fundamental divine power, making him quite comfortable. His fundamental divine power reached 450,000, an increase of 50,000 from before. It was already quite impressive. Second tribulation. Jian Wushuang focused all his thoughts on his origin source universe, paying little attention to the tribulation, which posed no significant threat, similar to the first one. He passed through it effortlessly. The origin source universe became slightly more real once again, and the number of black holes multiplied. It seems that the perfection of the universe as I perceived it when I was emperor is different after the tribulation. He initially thought his origin source universe wouldn't change anymore, but it continued to expand and strengthen. Now it had doubled in size with a whopping 20,000 black holes. Third tribulation. This time, his universe would become a true one, marking his attainment of the title of Universe Master. He was incredibly excited. Coming to the ancient moon spacetime was all for the sake of becoming the Universe Master, and now he was about to achieve that goal. He was more excited than anyone else. Come forth. Witness it with me. He raised his hand, welcoming the third tribulation. Although the external observers were making a lot of noise, some even ridiculing Jian Wushuang, saying that even if he became the universe master of the fifth tribulation, he would still be besieged and robbed by a group of powerful beings. Deep down they envied him greatly. Why was Jian Wushuang so powerful? Initially, they saw him as a senior to juniors, but seeing Jian Wushuang continuously growing stronger, they began to feel jealous as he approached them. They lamented their own fate of being stuck at the scattered tribulation level without the chance for advancement. Yet they witnessed Jian Wushuang's steady progress. The third tribulation has begun. As long as he summons the condensed universe into reality, this lad will be the universe master. Damn, he's really lucky. How could he have condensed such a perfect universe ahead of time? He's hit the jackpot. Still just a shooting star. Many people continued to mock him, oblivious to the fact that within Jian Wushuang's origin source universe stood a truly super existence capable of ending the 9 great spacetimes. Origin source universe. Tianqing Mountain. Weiss stood in front of his manor, holding a scepter in one hand and the other behind his back, watching Jian Wushuang's tribulation. It's not so easy to pull back such a large universe into reality. Weiss chuckled lightly. Buzz. The third tribulation descended. Jian Wushuang thought there might be some difference, but when it fell upon him, he felt no change at all. What's this? The origin source universe began to shake, but ultimately, it merely doubled the number of black holes in the universe to around 50,000. His fundamental divine power also increased to 600,000. But this wasn't the crucial point. The crucial point was that his universe hadn't become real. How is this possible? Jian Wushuang panicked immediately. The external experts, first surprised, then began to evaluate with gestures and comments. Haha, I knew it. He's defying the heavens so much that even the heavens want to claim him. Now, isn't this a surprise? The universe can't coalesce into reality. It's just a bubble. A senior at the 7th tribulation realm looked rather pleased, with a touch of sarcasm. But you can't put it that way. Jian Wushuang is still the first emperor in the entire river of time and space. Even if he can't become the master of the universe, becoming a scattered tribulation realm is still a good choice. He possesses the innate power of life, which can sustain his peak state indefinitely. So, does that mean he's become a special life form? No. Special life form don't need to undergo tribulations. Within the infinite great world. However, Jian Wushuang felt a chill in his heart. The elder of the Palunga clan found it hard to believe as well. Although he didn't know much about the master of the universe, he still had some common sense. Seeing Jian Wushuang undergo 3 tribulations but fail to turn the universe into reality, he understood that it might be a failure. At the foot of Dragon God Mountain, Gula hadn't yet noticed what had happened on the mountain. He only felt as if the infinite great world had changed its colors a bit, but he didn't sense anything particularly unusual. Instead, he felt excited about his battle with Wu Li. However, Wu Li's divine power was steadily declining. Blue. It's been the time for an incense stick, and you still haven't integrated properly? Wu Li couldn't hold on any longer. The divine power given to him by the Treant had plummeted to 1.2 million. He was no longer a match for Gula but still had to hold him off to prevent him from causing trouble for Blue. The fusion on Blue's side had reached a critical moment. Without answering Wu Li, Blue just stared at him firmly. I'll give you 10 breaths. Wu Li endured the backlash and forcefully increased his divine power again. The Treant kept injecting divine power as well, or else Wu Li would have been finished long ago. The injected divine power was completely different from his own triggered divine power. It was no longer distinguishable as innate or acquired. It was like a dry well being flooded with the waters of a river. How could he not feel uncomfortable? His divine body was almost ruined by the Treant. You can still increase? Gula noticed that Wu Li's divine power had risen again by another level, feeling somewhat surprised. It had risen back to 1.3 million this time. He no longer found it amusing but rather harbored some fear towards Wu Li. With a single hand gathering energy, a beam of light burst out, and his figure followed the light, rushing towards Wu Li. He suddenly wanted to end the battle quickly because Blue was still in the process of fusion. If something unexpected happened and these people turned the tables, it wouldn't be good. Though the waves surged before him, once Gula made up his mind, he was determined that the person he wanted to defeat must die. Wu Li was caught off guard by the sudden attack. He hastily wielded his sword to cut through the light waves condensed with divine power. But by the time Gula reached him, his hand was already in front of Wu Li, and the condensed light waves struck Wu Li's face at close range. Boom! Wu Li's body was sent rapidly backwards by the impact. The divine power he had just gathered began to waver once again. Meanwhile, Gula's divine power kept rising steadily. It had already reached 1.35 million. Now Wu Li fully understood Jian Wushuang's words. The transformation of the Frost Demon clan after transformation was indeed remarkable. As Wu Li's figure retreated, Gula appeared in front of him in advance, directly blocking his body that was being pushed back with a punch. This punch directly caused cracks to appear in Wu Li's divine body. The gathered divine power began to rapidly diminish. I will make you die in 9 breaths, and you won't even last until the 10th. Gula sneered, his arm directly gripping Wu Li's neck, while his other hand continued to pound Wu Li's back. Wu Li couldn't even cough up blood. A hole was gouged out of his chest. While his physical body was fine and could quickly recover even with a hole, if his divine body had a hole, it would be over. It was like someone sealing his dried-up well. The divine power began to decrease directly. Couldn't even be maintained at 1 million anymore. It's over, Wu Li whispered to himself. Even the Treant was panicking at this moment. They hadn't expected things to escalate to this level. We can only use that move. The Trent's voice echoed in Wu Li's mind. Wu Li gritted his teeth, knowing that there was no other choice now. If he didn't use that move, he would die. The loss would only be a treasure. If he hesitated, he would lose 2 lives. 1 body, 2 lives. If they were finished, Elder Blue would also be finished, and Dragon God Mountain would disappear. Jian Wushuang? Thinking of Jian Wushuang, Wu Li hesitated for a moment. It had been such a long time, he felt Jian Wushuang should be close to a breakthrough. Let's do it. The aura on Wu Li's body instantly transformed, and a phantom descended from the sky. Flakes of willow leaves drifted, divine power boundless. Hum! A sound of the resonance of heaven and earth rang out, shaking the entire infinite great world. Gula! Let this frog at the bottom of the well see the true terror of this world. After Wu Li finished speaking, his figure quickly rose. But there was a sapling left behind in the spot where he originally stood. That sapling was growing continuously. A surge of life force was also erupting. That was the life force released by the Treant, causing that sapling to continuously grow. A single blade of grass. It could cut through the sun, moon, and stars, and it could also give birth to the universe. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, the sapling transformed into a towering giant tree. Within a breath's time, he reached the realm of tribulation. Within 3 breaths, his divine power surpassed 1 million. That terrifying divine power continued to surge. What is this? Gula didn't dare to be careless, hastily retreating. But it was as if he had entered a maze, unable to escape the encirclement of the willow fluff. The giant willow grew. Divine power gathered to 1.4 million. Countless willow fluffs began to envelop Gula. Gula also felt the terrifying divine power. I must not. A 1.4 million divine power, enough to severely injure him. He couldn't afford to confront it head-on. Despite his speed, he couldn't break free from the restraint. The sapling grew into a giant willow, merging with the illusion. After completely binding Gula, it emitted a world-shaking sound. Boom! The entire Dragon God Great World turned into ruins. The Dragon God Mountain only had its peak remaining. Below was a bottomless pit. Gula's figure also vanished. Huff, huff! Wu Li gasped for breath, devoid of any strength. Once his breath steadied, Danbao hurried towards Wu Li. Seeing Danbao approaching, Wu Li smiled and spoke, "Thank goodness for you, otherwise I would have suffered a huge loss this time. He patted Danbao's round head and chuckled. Danbao's hand could only reach Wu Li's knee, so he grabbed Wu Li's thigh to start healing his injuries. A warm current flowed in. Not only was Wu Li restored, but the tray ant also sensed a familiar aura. When he looked towards the alchemy treasure, there was a hint of greed in his eyes. At that moment, Danbao's expression froze. Suddenly, he felt as if someone's eyes were fixed on him, and those eyes exuded a terrifying aura. Ah! Danbao was startled and stepped back, pointing at Wu Li. Wu Li, however, was puzzled. He didn't know what the tray ant was thinking, nor why Danbao was retreating. And judging from Danbao's pale face, he must have seen something. Just as Wu Li was about to turn around to look, a beam of light pierced through his chest at lightning speed. The beam of light, following through Wu Li's chest, rushed towards Danbao. At that moment, Blue completely transformed into a super warrior of the Palunga clan. With a flick of his toe, he appeared directly in front of Danbao and forcefully blocked the beam of light with a raised hand, deflecting it away. As Wu Li slowly turned around, his figure descending, he saw the figure behind him. Gula! The opponent was still alive, but he also had some injuries. His tail was severed. Standing on the only peak, Gula pointed at the falling Wu Li with resentment. Damn humans! I'll kill you all! Once again, several beams of light burst from his fingertips, rushing towards Wu Li. However, Blue had no intention of watching. With another flash of his figure, he rescued the falling Wu Li and casually deflected Gula's attacks with a raised hand. Take him back to the mountain. Leave this to me. Blue glanced sideways at Gula, then handed the unconscious Wu Li to Danbao. Wu Li, now awake, was out of breath. He was barely holding on. One slight mistake could lead to his demise. Even after being restored, he still needed to go to the peak of the Dragon God Mountain within the barrier. Danbao supported Wu Li's massive body and reminded, Elder Blue, be careful. Got it. Blue nodded, then added another instruction. Tell the Grand Elder not to make any unnecessary sacrifices. I can win this battle. Blue's voice was full of vigor, showing absolute confidence. Danbao nodded without saying much, and returned to the peak of the Dragon God Mountain through the barrier. Upon returning, he found Jian Wushuang sitting desolately on a fallen piece of rubble. The Grand Elder stood by, also looking forlorn. What happened? Danbao gently placed Wu Li down and looked at Jian Wushuang. Seeing Jian Wushuang not responding, he looked at the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder gestured not to speak, pointing at Wu Li, indicating that he should first heal Wu Li's injuries. He approached Jian Wushuang, saying, Perhaps some things are just as destined by heaven. But I don't believe that. Jian Wushuang shook his head. The elder of the Palunga clan, however, revealed a wise look and continued, Do you believe, then, that there are gods in this world? This question woke Jian Wushuang up. He still had Weiss. After crossing 3 tribulations, he couldn't grasp the universe. He could ask Weiss about this. I believe. He seemed to regain his confidence and stood up directly. The elder chuckled. The dragon god. He was a god. He once told me that if I fell, the Palunga clan would perish, but I didn't believe it. At the end of his words, he awkwardly froze, not knowing how to explain to the other party. After a moment of thought, he patted the elder's shoulder and reminded him, Actually, you don't have to die. You don't need to stimulate your potential now, and if you really don't want to live, you might as well merge with Blue. This way, you won't die, and Blue will become stronger. Merge. One sentence awakened the dreamer. This time it was the elder's turn to contemplate life. But Jian Wushuang didn't have this leisurely time. He leaped to his own universe of thought. Tianqing Mountain. Summit. Weiss, you're just thinking of me now? It seems I don't have much of a place in your heart. Weiss chuckled, covering his mouth. But Jian Wushuang didn't have time to joke with him. He hurriedly asked, I'm already at the 3rd tribulation realm, but I can't grasp the universe. Where did I go wrong? It's simple. To let Jian Wushuang know how powerful he was, Weiss revealed a little. With a wave of his staff, a miniature starry sky condensed. Jian Wushuang was startled. Simply put, you were too hasty, eager to perfect the universe. But such a perfected universe is just wishful thinking, not the true universe, which prevented you from understanding the essence of the universe. Weiss pointed at the evolving universe in the starry sky and continued, but you're lucky. Being able to draw a perfect universe on a piece of paper has actually helped you now. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang was stunned. Now he couldn't even condense a real universe, so how could this be considered helping him? Was he supposed to use the one-thought universe from now on? Turning a piece of paper into a Tao arena. That would become the joke of the entire spacetime. He couldn't afford to lose face like that, and he couldn't let teacher Xianyi lose face either. In this state, he was going to see Master Xianyi. Wasn't that embarrassing himself? Since you can't grasp the universe at the third tribulation, then go through a few more tribulations. When your strength is a bit stronger, you'll be able to grasp the universe when it matches your original universe. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered with surprise. Cross more tribulations? But now he couldn't sense the supreme rules anymore. How could he cross the tribulations then? Immediately, he voiced his dilemma. Upon hearing this, Weiss chuckled lightly and said, "This is even simpler." Simpler. Jian Wushuang's forehead sweated a drop, feeling that Weiss was boasting even more than him. If the supreme law rules were simple, everyone would have reached the ninth tribulation realm. How could something like this be simple? But before he could dwell on this statement, layers of tribulation clouds condensed once again in the sky. This time he truly believed. This is possible? He raised his head to glance at the tribulation clouds in the sky, then looked at Weiss. Even the supreme law rules could be controlled. This was the true God. Now, even if Weiss asked him to cross the ninth tribulation, he would believe it. It was too terrifying. Even the supreme law rules could be controlled. A true God. Jian Wushuang raised his thumb and leaped up, beginning to face the fourth tribulation. Outside, the strong ones noticed the tribulation clouds condensing once again, all stunned. They couldn't see Weiss's existence, so naturally, they had no idea what was happening. They only saw Jian Wushuang, looking desolate, talking with Elder Blue of the Palunga clan for a few moments, then brimming with confidence. Returning to his own one-thought universe, it took only a moment to trigger the fourth tribulation. But Jian Wushuang hadn't even grasped the true universe, so how could he start crossing tribulations? Everyone found it hard to believe. Around the heavenly canopy, not a single tribulation realm expert spoke. Just now, they were convinced that Jian Wushuang was finished. But now, they could only watch him cross the fourth tribulation. At this moment, someone couldn't accept it and said, "Let's wait and see. Going against the supreme law rules, the fourth tribulation will definitely be extraordinary. Maybe he'll perish without a trace."